everyone. Okay, I think that is the case. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. This is a regular meeting of the Ivy Community Services District. I'd like to announce that the meeting is being recorded. Jonathan, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, Director Brandt.
Here.
Director Geis.
Here.
Director Bertrand.
Here.
Director Freeman.
Here.
Director Hedges is absent, Director Nguyen is absent, and Director Thurlow. Oh, I think I need to unmute George. Give me a second. There's a lot of people on. Here we go. George, you're here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Muting me will not work.
All right, great. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Chumash people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue the tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. With that, we're going to go to the consent agenda. Do any directors have any items they'd like to pull?
Spencer, I have to mention one thing. Item 2.2, I noticed that wrong. It was my bad. So we're going to need to push that to the next meeting.
Okay, so then we will pull item 2.1 and consider that individually. Does anyone have a motion?
Move approval. I'll move approval.
We have a motion by Thurlow. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Geis. Is there any public comment? Any further board discussion? Okay, Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Thurlow?
Yes.
Director Geis?
Yes.
Director Bertrand?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0 with 2 absences. Okay, with that, we're going to go to the public comment period. At this time, any members of the public may speak. This is for items that are not on our agenda currently. This is general public comment. We're not going to take any action on any items that are not on our agenda. Is there, Jonathan, have we received any requests through the Google form?
Not that I can see right now. Let me check one more. Let me refresh it to make sure we didn't leave anybody out.
Okay. And if anyone has a request to speak that's here, if you just want to raise your hand or say something in the chat box right now, or unmute yourself and
yes,
speak
we
up.
do have one from Janet Stitch, and she wants to speak on COVID-19 homelessness, but I don't know if she's on the call right now or if she's going to wait till the item later.
Great question. If possible, I'll ask her if she could save her comment for when we talk about homelessness, and I think I'll try to come to it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, she just filled this out like a little bit ago, so I will email her.
Okay, that's great. If we can always skip around on the agenda and go back to her if she gets on the call later or something like that. Okay. Then in that case, we're going to go to discussion action items. And the first thing that we're going to begin with is item 4.3, which is the Community Service Officer Safety Station Annual Report.
Director Brand, actually, we have someone from the building assessment firm here for the first.
I'm so sorry about it. I didn't know that they were on here. Okay, so we're going to just take them in order and go to 4.1, the building assessment for Isla Vista Community Center and Community Resource Building.
And Spencer, I'm going to recuse myself from this item. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Bertrand.
And Deborah, do you want to open it up and pass it on to Gary?
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. Good evening, everyone. Today we have with us Gary Stevens from Partners Engineering and Services, Inc. Gary was kind enough to come out this past Saturday, April 25th, and conduct a building inspection of the 970 and 976 Embarcadero Del Mar buildings. The purpose of his inspection was to give us a property condition assessment. Today, he's prepared to give you a brief oral report out of what he, critical issues that he noted. His report will be a written and formal report, and analysis will be prepared and presented hopefully no later than our May, I think it's our 11th meeting date. But for this evening, Gary's going to provide you with items so noted during the building assessment inspection that he conducted on Saturday. Thank you, Gary.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I want to go over both of the buildings, 970 and 976, with the emphasis being on building 970. What I want to do is start with what that building was originally intended to do. And that building was designed as a retail use, not as an office use. So what happens, or what's happened, is that there's a variety of implications that don't work well for an office use, with the intended or original use of it being a retail center. The effects of that encompass quite a few different areas of the building, and I'll go over these. For one, the existing doors are non-compliant for exiting use for the office occupancy, and they're potentially dangerous in the case of fire. So what I discovered is that in the retail portions of the building, which are the ground level storefronts and the second level doors and windows up there, is that the hardware and locking means for the doors are improper and non-compliant. The doors themselves are a low-cost item and generally at the end of their effective useful life. They have years of wear and tear. And where I'm going with this is that generally that's one of the main items that we're going to have to look at as replacement, and affects several other aspects of the building as well. Other doors within the office area and the medical use component of the building also have somewhat of an improper use and are not fully and completely secure for the type of area that the building is situated in. So that's another area of concern. The exiting hardware is not correct on them, and the ability for somebody to access them from the outside of the building is really fairly easy for somebody to do a break-in. So that's another area that I'm concerned about. These are also relatively low-cost doors. The storefront system at the front of the building, again, is not energy efficient, and the current HVAC is not keeping up with the needs of the space as it is partitioned currently. Additionally, the thermostats are outdated and improperly located, causing additional issue with the HVAC system. It appears that the HVAC zones in these areas no longer perform correctly or with efficiency. So what I've got here really is a building that was designed for an occupancy that is not suited for the office use that it currently holds. And if you want to bring this up to current office standards, you're going to have to rethink a lot of this and approach it from a new standpoint. It's going to require the changing of some of the window systems, the door systems. You're going to have to look more carefully at how the exiting works and how the security of the building is going to be handled. So there are some basic issues with that. The HVAC system, several of the units on the roof are now really relatively old, and they're going to have to be replaced. Part of the problem is that these units weren't designed for this retail component of the building, and they're simply not keeping up with the needs of the building. The thermostats weren't placed correctly, and that's causing an issue with the units overrunning and running at hours that are not well suited or really needed for the building, generating additional expenses. Moving on to other items with the 970 building, the roof requires a complete tear off and replacement. This includes the roof hatch. The roof looks like it's original to the building, or at least 20 some years old, and has a fluid applied coating that's now failing. Coatings typically on these types of roofs try to provide an additional 10 years of life out of the roof. And we're really at the end of that. One of the other issues along the same lines are the balcony to the rear of the building. And the moisture barrier in that balcony has now failed. So what's happening is you're getting interior leaks from that balcony, and likely from some areas of the roof due to the age of the existing membrane and the fact that it's at a point where it's failing. The balcony is going to need a little more work because it's tiled. You're going to have to take that tile off and reestablish that moisture barrier. Same thing goes with the north stair landing. The stairs all need to be resurfaced, and a waterproof coating is going to need to be applied to that. That simply at this point is aged out. Talking about the building shell, one of the issues is that the building foundation is now too close to the soil, and soil needs to be removed away from the building foundation and wall system to about 8 inches below the stucco system that is the primary exterior coating of the building. I'm really concerned of moisture intrusion due to the soil being so close. That is a relatively simple item to be able to take care of, but something that needs to be done. I've talked a little bit about some of the HVAC system and the fact that some of those units up the roof are going to be need to be replaced immediately and will need to be replaced over the term of the report, which is 10 years. The elevator. So I wasn't able to access the elevator control room with the equipment in it, but based upon what I found and saw with the movement of the elevator, is that currently it's lacking some servicing and there's an issue with it. The extent of the issue is just simply unknown at this time, but I have little doubt that the elevator itself needs a modernization, and that could be a very costly item. One of the other overall aspects of the building that I'm somewhat concerned about is that the zoning of it is, well, not correct. Currently, it's a non-compliant use for the type of occupancy. It appears to be zoned as a C2, which is not compliant to office use, and is not compliant to the medical component use of the building. You simply don't have the parking available there to substantiate either of those uses. I'm not quite sure what you're going to be able to do with that or how you handle that. I'm not sure how that building was permitted or the interior improvements were permitted for the office use, but certainly to current zoning standards, it's a non-compliant use. The site should have a barrier wall put between it and the parking area and the retail building at the street frontage. Right now, those areas commingle, and that's simply not a good use for the office aspect of the building or the medical aspect of the building. So that's a recommendation I'm going to, throw into the report as well. Let's talk about restrooms for a minute. Most of the I shouldn't say most, but a number of the restrooms are not disabled accessible. And they're going to require everything from a major remodel to minor aspects. So you're going to have to address that with any improvements that you make. Several of the interior doors within the office component of the building also are not disabled accessible. So those are going to need to be addressed. Pocket doors simply are not accessible. The knob hardware will need to be changed out. Really what's going to happen is a large number of those doors will have to be changed out with any improvements that you take. There's concrete flatwork issues around the front of the building where there's going to need to be some sectional replacement done. The rail spacing on the stairs are improper. If we move over to building 976 for a moment, the water heater has some issues. It's old, it's not strapped, it's going to need to be replaced. But the bigger issue over at 976 apparently is water intrusion through the loading dock type doors, the roll-up doors. And when those were installed, there is nobody thought to put a linear drain in front of them. And that's now become an issue because the sloping directs water, stormwater, towards those doors. And those doors just don't have the capability to prevent the water from entering the space. So that's a relatively big ticket item. That pretty much gives you an overview of the basic items. What we'll do in the report is identify each one of these things, elaborate on all of them, and then provide you with estimated costs to address each one of these items, plus some additional items that at this point I still need to put my arms around and describe in detail in a variety of ways that I'm just not prepared to review at this time. Those items really are relatively small and low cost. That's about the sum of it for me. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Stevens, for your report. We really appreciate it. I'm going to go over to Director Thurlow.
So, Gary, it really sounds like you're suggesting we buy this right now.
I'm sorry, wait, buy the building, are you saying? Well, it depends.
I'm just kidding. That's a grim report. Give us a ballpark, and we're not going to hold you to this at all. And, we all really appreciate the fact that you got out on this in this kind of challenging time and gave us, my sense is 976, that's the one that I think we were most concerned about. But obviously you've driven our attention to 970.
Well, that's the building with problems.
That's the building with problems. And, I think that's probably not originally where we were going.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, 976 has a relatively new roof, new air conditioning units. The space is relatively simple inside at the interior. That building really doesn't have a lot of tremendous issues. 970, on the other hand, as you were discussing, how would I reposition that? Well, you're right at the edge of a shell and core remodel.
At what cost?
Well, that's something I still have to determine.
No, I know you're going to give it to us in a report, but give it to us the back of an envelope right now.
You know what? I just couldn't.
Over a million? Over a million?
Right offhand, I don't recall the square footage of the building. Does anybody have that information?
Yeah, I can grab that for you in 1 second for the whole building.
That'd be great. And I might be able to ballpark something.
What, $400 a square foot?
Well, that's where I'm kind of going. I wouldn't quite go to $400 a square foot.
Yeah, well,
it's 10,000 square feet, 9,914. But let's.
All right, we'll just call it 10,000 square feet. So let me look at some numbers.
Well, even $300 a square foot puts us at $3 million, right?
$2 million. Yeah, you're probably going to be somewhere between 200 and 250, 275 a square foot, depending upon how you handle the medical component. The issue here, okay, is that you're going to have to do a new roof through the whole thing. The whole office component and the retail component, that all needs to be scraped, and you need to start over. And you need to design it to really what your best use is. So let's say the medical component you somehow figure out is just going to remain. Somehow you're going to get past zoning with it. All right. Zoning is not going to complain or have a problem with it. Which, again, from your standpoint and where you guys are positioned, I'm not quite sure what the liberties are. But at the very least, you really need to relook at that whole office retail component, scrape it, start over. The exiting is dangerous. The air conditioning is substandard. The window system now is so out of energy efficiency that it's not worth working with. So
if I can just follow up, Spencer. Spencer, can
Go
I
ahead.
follow up?
Sorry.
Just a quick statement. I mean, this is really an eye opener, and Gary, I really, really, again, appreciate what you've told us. I mean, essentially, what you're directing us to is, we don't take over the office building. We do take over the community center. In other words, if we were buyers, if we were buying this property, you'd probably tell us, geez, you're buying a $2.5 million elephant here. And on the other hand, 976, just replace the water heater.
pretty much. So 970 is a complicated issue. That, in my book, with the people that I deal with all the time, requires a savvy buyer that knows how to put their arms around the existing conditions and knows how to move forward with rectifying all of it in a cost-effective way. All right, that's not real simple. You would have to relocate your staff and really truly just start over there. And again, I'm really concerned about the medical component. It's simply an illegal use.
Okay, let's delete that.
Thank you,
No,
George.
you're
and
right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much,
you.
Gary.
Thank you for your report, Gary. Are there any other directors that have questions?
I just wanted to ask Gary, this is Bob, guys.
Go ahead, Bob.
Hey, Gary, what did you think about the condition of outside the building, the lack of landscaping, the slopes out there? Did you look at any of that?
Yeah, I did. And that's why I made a comment about separating the parking area between the retail building in the front. So, yeah, the landscaping needs to be addressed, but it's not a huge item that I'd be terribly concerned about. Really, what you need to do is move the soil away from the, each elevation of the building so that water is not creeping up into the stucco system, the fascia of the building. That's not that difficult to do. Replanting some of that area, not that difficult to do. Okay. Securing the perimeter of that, different story. I don't quite know where the boundary lines are. And, you certainly have a situation with homeless encampments there that's not going to go away. But at the very least, to have what is considered a basic office use, an expectation, my feeling is, and this is somewhat subjective, that really what you need to do is create a separation between the retail building in the front and your building in the back there.
So I kind of guess I misunderstood where you were talking about putting a wall in. It's between the two buildings. It's to
Correct.
So you can't walk down that slope.
It's between, basically in the parking lot, okay, the parking space between the two buildings.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Director Geis. Are there any other directors that have questions? Okay, I think I'm seeing none. I just want to close out by saying a big thank you to you, Mr. Stevens, for this presentation. We've got a lot of challenges that you've made abundantly clear to us, and we appreciate your frankness, your forthrightness. We are eager to get our hands on that report as well, so that we can have the fullest understanding possible, because these are potential commitments that we'd be entering into that are long term and that have real consequences. So we'll need to really dot our I's and cross our T's. We appreciate you helping us do that.
Certainly. And I'd like to reiterate, the zoning, you really need to have an expert look into the zoning and make sure you don't end up with something that's a long-term legality and contractual issue, full of litigation.
Can I just make a last comment?
Go ahead, George.
So just to give you context, the buildings are owned by the county. The county controls zoning. We are a government agency that operates in partnership with the county. So the fact is, it's the county that oversees zoning in this area that is operating a non-compliant use. So that adds an even more interesting element to what you're saying.
A very interesting element that, I really just don't know how to fully address. And let me give you an example, okay? If I was the owner of that retail building in the front at the street frontage, and I decided that now that you've redeveloped your office building and my parking is a problem, and I look up the zoning, and I clearly see that that medical use is not allowed and that office use is not allowed, what would I do? Okay, I could go to the county and complain, but as you're saying, it's their building. So where does it come down to? It's that litigation word.
Yeah.
Hey, Gary, what does C2 zoning let you do?
Retail use.
Retail.
Yeah. Now,
And medical is not retail?
That's correct.
Mm.
Yeah, or office. They all have different requirements for parking. And I realize you're leasing some off-site parking, and certainly there's a lot of different arguments that can be made for, off-site parking and this and that. But what I want to point out is that it's not straightforward. And the more arguments that you can make or create or have to defer to, the more trouble it is for you, all of you.
So Spencer, can I ask one last question?
Go ahead, George.
So you obviously work on a lot of these different, as a consultant and an analyst, expert witness. What would you suggest we do?
The first thing is establish the zoning use and rights to that property and have it in writing. That's the very first thing I would do, and make sure that you're indemnified. If you end up owning that building, you want to make sure you have a 100% clear and legal use of the current occupancies. Okay? You want it in writing. You want something from the county that says this is 100% compliant and that you will not be held liable. Okay? Along those same, lines, part of what we look at and what I looked at is, where do you have safety issues in litigation? And your two big areas really are disabled access. You're at a place in that building where there's a lot of opportunity for a redundant litigant that specializes in disabled accessible requirements to litigate. And lastly, I'm really concerned about the emergency exiting out of that building from every standpoint. And the office component, we'll separate that from the retail. Your exiting corridors and means of egress are correct and proper, but your locks on your doors aren't. Okay, if there was a fire in that building and somebody didn't make it out, right now, the way it stands, the litigation would not go well for you. from the retail standpoint of those, spaces at the front of the building, at the balcony and the ground floor, again, there's clearly signs above every one of those doors that say this needs to be unlocked during business hours. But yet, because of the homeless condition and the fact that those doors now are at the end of their life and they don't open and close well and stuff flows in from under them, everybody's locking those doors. I would lock those doors, just based upon the fact that, right around that corner is this homeless condition that has a danger potential. The problem is, once you lock those doors, you no longer have proper exiting. If there's a fire in there and somebody can't get out, you're going to be on the wrong end of litigation.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Stevens, for your report. We really appreciate your thoroughness, and as I mentioned, we're looking forward to seeing the whole thing. For our board, it's really clear that we've got a lot of challenges moving forward with these buildings, and I think it's just important that we weigh this report, give this report its proper weight as we consider this going forward in our strategy. We want to make sure that these are public spaces that continue to be accessible community spaces for all. And we also want to make sure that we are using our limited public resources wisely. So we appreciate the report as a way of focusing that.
Certainly. And once you get the report and you review it, please feel free to contact me again. And, we certainly could have this discussion with everybody.
Absolutely.
It'll actually be a little easier. You'll have all the detail in front of you.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Mr. Stevens.
Very well. I'm going to sign off now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Gary. I'll be in touch.
Okay, great.
Okay. With that, I think we're going to move on from item 4.1. We'll be looking forward to seeing a copy of the full report once it's released. Jonathan, if you feel it's proper, I'm not sure if we have anyone for item 4.2, but I believe we do have a number of folks from the UC Police Department for item 4.3 and 4.4.
Yeah, 4.2 is just so you can skip.
Okay, so with that, we're going to move on to item 4.3, the CSO Safety Station Annual Report. I will just say, as a brief introduction to this item and our next item for our board, following our budget process, this is sort of our opportunity to review the programs as they exist for our budget committee to get feedback on if we need to make changes in the budget, and for our staff to hear if our board would like a different approach for how things are managed, whether it's under a contract in this case, or whether we want to build on the progress that we've made. So just throwing that out there to frame the discussion, and I'll hand it back over to you, Jonathan.
Great.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to recuse myself from items 3 and 4.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll note that.
And I'll check back in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have folks from UCPD here to present on both. So if you all need to do one before the other, we can, if anyone has some time crunch. But I have your reports pulled up and it's up. You can take it away. I can start the screen share now. Thank you all for being on. Someone unmute, maybe one of our presenters. Oh, hey, I think I unmuted you now. You good?
Good?
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay. Hey, it's Dave Millard from the UC Police Department here. And what I want to look at first is the pie charts that I made, Jonathan.
Okay.
If you have those.
Yeah.
And what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the IB safety station, the escorts to contact, and the water use. This might be easier to look at. So how I broke this down was I went through the Excel spreadsheet and I looked at the entries that had been made. And what I did was, for the top square, in looking at the escorts and stuff that we did, I broke it down by location so we can kind of see who's doing what and where they're going. So as you can see, we had 107 escorts that were in Isla Vista. So that's one Isla Vista location to another. We had approximately about 82 to IV to campus. So people in IV moving to campus. And then we had a smattering of some other ones there, which was a campus to IV and campus to campus. I'm not quite sure why those are in there, but they were in the reported numbers. So what we come up with is we came up there with a total of 196 escorts for fall and winter. Of course, winter ended, I believe that was right mid-March. So, and there hasn't been too much going on since. But when I looked at some of the other usages that were going on within the tent, folks coming in and using the charging station and water, so getting water and using the charging station, that was 360. So when we look at the total number, that's about 556 folks were coming through the tents, and that was when both tents were up and running. So that's a fairly good number. I imagine it would have probably went up maybe another third or a little bit more maybe by the end of the year, or a little bit less by the end of the year. And then there were, out of the water that was used, what was recorded, what I counted up was 119 5-gallon containers of water that were used during that time. So we're keeping people hydrated. We're keeping people coming to the tents to get their phone charged, to get the water, and the escorts are continuing on as we go. From those as well, it looked like right around 100 escorts were the ones that phone in. So I believe that's why it's categorized as a regular escort. And then we had a little over 100 of walk-up escorts. So if you're looking at it, there's a little variance in the number. There were some entries that were extremely hard to read, so I didn't include those in the locations, like IB to campus, but I did count them overall as escorts that happened. So that is why there's a little variance in the number. You just couldn't read some of them. So that's kind of a really brief overview of what we've done and what's been going on with the safety stations. I still think the safety stations are valuable. It is a contact spot for the residents of the Isla Vista community, and I think it's been working out. It's been working out well. I would like to see it continue in the form that it is. Maybe if there are suggestions or some ideas, we can definitely look at those. But I think it's been a good product that we collectively all have put out. I think it's something that should continue in the future. On the call as well are Rob Crew and Pam Gebhardt. I'm thinking they might have something to add, so I'll stop talking in case they want to add anything.
Oop, sorry. You're unmuted, Rob.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I just want to reiterate what the LT said. We seeing strong community engagement as far as people walking up and getting water, even though they're not using escorts as much. We were in the midst of trying to increase our advertising with the signage before all this virus COVID thing happened and slowed us down. So all that's on pause right now. Another thing I wanted to mention that's pretty significant was that the CSOs at the tent were able to intercede in a shooting in March. Because they were on site, were able to call in the shooting while it was still a fight, which allowed officers to be on the way and not only get a good identification of the shooter, but take him into custody. So that was valuable. And I think that's what we're seeing. The people felt safe there. They congregated there during the incident. And so we're seeing community engagement even though that's not necessarily translating into escorts. Pam, you had mentioned something about weather also.
Right. So I think at the beginning of winter quarter, some of our numbers were down a little bit, and that's when we kind of had the heavier rain. So I think we got to take that into in factor as well.
Is there any questions?
Okay. Thank you so much for the report. We really appreciate it. For members of the board, if anyone has a question right now, go ahead and put your hand up or wave me down. I see Director Freeman, and I'll go to you first.
So can I get a reminder of how much the program costs? I don't remember.
Yeah, the program costs $57,000 a year, but this year we spent $41,000 on it because it was only 2 quarters.
And there was going to be a change that was going to be made, at least as best I remember, with respect to the number of tents we have. How many tents do we currently have?
2. This is the budget with the 2 tents.
2 tents. And how many people do we have per tent?
5.
And we have also, I think there's a dispatcher. In addition to the people we have at
the
the
dispatcher tent? Is included in that 10.
Oh, but so there's 5 people at one of the tents, 5 people at the other tent, and then one of the 10 people is a dispatcher?
So we have 4 people in each tent, 1 lead,
okay,
and 1 dispatcher.
Got it. I understand now. Okay. And how much of the budget of the 41,000, for example, that we spent is spent on staffing as opposed to any equipment that we might have? Or
it's almost 100% minus the water, which I don't have those figures in front of me right now, but I would probably say 90% is on staffing. We haven't had to buy any additional equipment this year. Just water. We've had we have the phone chargers and all of the equipment from last year that are still good, including the tents.
Okay. So that's $4,000 a person. So given because we do this thing, right, because we have to, in order to be able to send people off on escorts, we have 4 people at the tent in order to allow for people to leave, like, a team of 2 to leave in order to give an escort and still leave people at the tent. Is that am I correct there?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So we're paying, in order to be able to have the additional people at the tents for escorts, we're paying $16,000, which we're dividing among our 200 some escorts. And so we're looking at, nearly $100. We're looking at $80 to $100 an escort. And I continue to wonder and whether or not, I need to be very clear about this because everyone always seems to misunderstand this somehow. I really like the existence of this program, and I really like the tents. I really like having people at the tents, and I really like having that on the ground, in the community ability to call things in and have connections with people and have people come up for waters. There's a entirely separate, really, aspect of this, which is adding extra people to allow us to do the escorts in the field on the fly like that. And when we're talking about that additional component that we're paying for, looking at nearly $100 an escort, I feel like we could instead give people a budget to just call a Lyft, or like, there's got to be some cheaper way of getting people safe transport around these different areas than to be paying $80 an escort for that additional use. Now again, I am not saying, because this confusion happens every year when I do this. I am not saying that I don't want this program to happen. I am not saying that I want to cancel it. I'm not saying that I want to defund it. In fact, I'm not even saying I want to lower the funding. I could see the argument of taking the current amount of funding that's going to the program, the same number of people, and just saying, let's have 4 tents or 3 tents, maybe the lead, the way that you down with dispatcher, but like, let's have more tents. And that way we get more of the things that I like from the program, which are the in the community ability to see what's going on, the feeling of connection with people, to know that we care about public safety, the water and the charging and all of that stuff. And then we figure out how to decrease the cost of these escorts by 4 or 5 times by just getting somebody a car to take them home.
So, I mean, I think I understand where you're coming from. And my thing is like, would you rather support a big business like a Lyft, or an additional, another community member who's a student, as a CSO, helping other students get home? And basically that's what you're paying for, is you're helping these members of the Isla Vista community as well, as instead of paying Lyft.
Also, our students are background checked and vetted by the police department. So we know when somebody goes with one of our kids, they're safe.
Right.
In the Lyft, we don't know what's going on.
And also you're paying for the presence, not just necessarily the escorts. And I know you touched on that a little bit, but just having them out there, like Rob said, the shooting that happened, or, in March, those are just big factors of just having people, or just, the CSOs out there with their presence.
Yeah, but I really want, because that argument comes up every time I bring this up, and I'm absolutely not. I want to increase the presence by spreading it out more. I don't want to get stop paying people to do the program. I don't want to, I'm not trying to reduce the cost. I'm just trying to maximize the benefit that we get from the thing we like for the cost. And it's not even clear to me that from the perspective of the number of people that we'd be hiring, that it would actually, because of the cost of the actual number of escorts we have for alternative transport, would be so cheap in some sense. But I do appreciate the comment that was made about the background checks on the people, and that is a big differentiator of the CSO program versus if we particularly some kind of private outsourcing. Trust me, I really despise Uber. I pretty much despise Lyft, even though it's started here in Santa Barbara. But it's it's just looking at the cost and the numbers for the benefit, and trying to think about, like, I mean, if I were to already, like, if we already had the program where we had 3 or 4 tents, and we were asking the question, do we reduce the number of tents we have in order to provide the escort service? I feel like the question would be starting from a different premise, and we might be coming to different, like, biased conclusions than what we started with. We got the escorts, and now we're asking the question, do we want to increase the number of tents by like decreasing the escort process? So, yeah.
I think that's stuff we can still, think of, Jay. I think one thing that concerns me about Lyft and the more cars that come into town is transporting that student to the middle of Del Playa in a car, sometimes on the weekends. That could be a challenge in itself. And then the amount of foot traffic is it going to be 2, 6, 10, 12 Lyft drivers trying to pick kids up in town? I think that in itself could get a little challenging. It already is challenging with some vehicle traffic, but I think from that aspect, it could be a little challenging. And, sometimes Del Playa it's a little bit easier to navigate on foot than it would be in a car for someone going from Little Acorn Park to, 6680 Del Playa. It could be
that's a very fair point, particularly the notion of, and the incapability of even utilizing cars for some of the purposes here. The burst capacity, I will note, and we already, like, we've got 6. We're not going to have 6 lifts, but necessarily, like, if we did, that would be great in some sense, because, like, right now we don't have 6 escorts, we don't have 6 teams of people to be doing it. So
I think kind of like the whole, like, the bottom line of it is that it would be great if we had more escorts. Like, the CSOs would enjoy that, if they had more escorts. So I think that's been one of the challenges, is just getting more people to the tent. And with the water and the charging stations, that's really helped a lot with just the number of contacts, but still getting those escorts still proves to be, a little bit of a challenge for people to walk up to the tent and stuff. So we've tried different things, signs, they play music, we've given out snacks, just all types of things. So, we welcome any suggestions you guys might have in, trying to get more students in.
And there could be another factor in there. It could be, students being a little bit more confident in their safety, and students congregating in groups more for safety. And there's many factors that we could probably, without knowing them, guess. But it's tough to say. I think the services has proven over the past few years to be successful in the eyes of the students themselves and in the eyes of the department and hopefully the CSD. But it's never hurts to continue to explore options and continue to look at things on the ways we can, augment or improve the program. I think that that's a plus all the way around. But to say there's a drop that students aren't interested, I don't know if that's really clear enough to say that. It could be many things, especially students, traveling in groups together, feeling more safe. It could be that as well.
Yeah. Thank you so very much for answering my questions, and certainly I like the existence of this program. So
thanks.
Thank you, Director Freeman and UCSB Police Department. I do want to say really quickly, I just would like to ask that the UCSB Police Department convey our board's sincerest admiration and thank yous to our students that serve as CSOs. We've seen now time and time again that their presence in the community not only makes a difference in terms of helping people find a safe way home, but they're there when some of these critical issues come up in our community. This year, we have of the shooting fresh on our mind. But I remember last year it was CSOs who were providing crucial information in a investigation regarding sexual violence. I remember that it was the CSOs that were there to help someone who was literally brought to their tent by a Lyft driver that had no idea what to do with a student who was intoxicated. And so I think it's just really, I guess I just want to convey a sincere thank you to them for their service and just how proud I am of what we've been able to do with the program. I'll hold some of my comments till the end because I think we have other board members that want to comment. And so first I'm going to go over to Director Bertrand.
Thank you, President Brandt. UCPD, thank you all so much for continuing to work with us on this service. I really think it's been an incredible benefit to the community. I'm really proud of all the folks who have been out there working and really making a difference. I think this has been a great example for expanding community policing in Isla Vista, where we bring in community members to take part in keeping us all safe. So I really appreciate that. I definitely want to see how we can further expand this. One idea that we had at the implementation of this program was trying to have regular participation from other organizations to join us at the tables and do outreach for the various efforts that they were working on. And I think that now that this program is up and running and operating really well, maybe we revisit that. How can we have more partnerships with various student groups, especially out in the community on those evenings? Maybe that's something we revisit. Also, exploring how through social media and other digital efforts we can expand the public education about the services that are available and just make it more known. But also, I'm definitely interested to see if there are any other locations that would be good for us to expand to. I think that would be great if we can increase our reach. But overall, just thank you so much for all that you do. We see the difference and we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Bertrand. Are there other board members that have comment on this item? I see Director Geis. I'm going to go over to you.
Yeah, I just wondered, do you have many of your engagements in people needing medical attention? Are they comfortable enough to come up to the tent and say, I ran into something, I need to go get fixed or get some help? Do you run into that at all?
I haven't particularly heard that.
Okay.
At all. I can't say if it has or happened. I just haven't heard.
Yeah, I just heard, during the big parties, there's a lot of medical transports that happen to the emergency room and stuff. And I just didn't know if it happened and students or others would be comfortable coming up to the safety stations and say, hey, could you help me get some medical attention? Like Spencer said with the Uber idea, where the Uber driver went there. So I didn't know if that's something we could, it just seems like something you could open up where people would feel comfortable to come there to get help.
Yeah, I think that that's a great idea, and I think that that's on track with maybe trying to bust some of the myths about, maybe CSOs are connected to law enforcement and somebody goes where they may get arrested. Trying to get over those myths can be challenging. Prior to the pandemic happening, I was talking with and working with the folks for UCIV, and we were talking about ways to connect with the tents and connect more folks in Anonymous, and they were really had a game plan to start a big recruitment. And we were going to be part of that with the tents and our staff out there, but then things happen. But that'll still be on the table when we hopefully get back to up and running soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Geis. Are there other board members that have comments? Okay, I'm gonna bring it back to my comments on this. I think that what this report shows is that we are making steady progress, even under the specter of COVID-19 and the pandemic. We were able to get a good year under our belt, and I think that the service is now reaching the point where people are used to and expecting the safety stations on Friday and Saturday nights. And I think that that is really an accomplishment in and of itself, that we are able to have them serve as that presence that people know can be depended on and can be counted upon. This is a community-oriented policing model that really, I think, is a model for other communities. It is definitely a model for college-oriented communities like ours, where we are constantly having to do the work as law enforcement agencies of building and rebuilding relationships and trust with the student community. And that really is the most important thing. And I'm excited that this program really is, I think, the quintessence of that effort. I agree with some of the comments that other board members had made about the direction forward and what some of our goals should be for in 2020. Obviously, we have sort of the cloud looming over our head of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're still unsure as how that's going to play out for UC Santa Barbara and Santa Barbara City College operations and attendance in the fall. But regardless, I think that we have some goals that we can set for next year to try and increase the usage of the stations. The first thing is in line with what Director Bertrand mentioned about trying to do more social media promotion. I appreciate, Lieutenant Mard, you mentioned that we want to do some myth busting on some of the perception things with CSOs to try and make them even more accessible. And I feel like a social media ad campaign and getting one ready for once the safety stations are back online could be a great use. I also think that we've seen that the most popular service that the stations provide and to draw people in and make them more comfortable possibly utilizing an escort are the water bottles and the phone chargers. And I think we have room to go even further and maybe look at providing Wi-Fi that's on site in order for people to be able to connect to the internet when they're in a pinch. I don't really foresee people coming up to the tents and bringing a table and chair and with their laptop and doing some studying. But I think that it could be really useful for people who are in a pinch, and a lot of students, because of their economic situation, will run out of cellular data. And I know it's happened to friends of mine before when they're out and about on Friday and Saturdays. So it's something that I'd like to see us look at to see if it makes sense, if it's cost effective to try and draw more people in. I also really agree with the suggestion that we try and revamp our partnership efforts with other organizations. We've had some success with that in the past with groups like Life of the Party, with UCIV, and I think there's room for us to try and reopen that once we reopen society and get them back out there. I think it's a really easy way to try and make the CSO scene even more accessible to random passersby. So I also am supportive of the idea of looking at different models when it comes to locations, and I think we're gonna again sort of do this wait and see approach that we're all in for whether or not that's something that we can make use of, in this current fiscal year. But I am supportive. I think that the service overall is going to grow in utilization the more physically present it is, and the more saturation that the CSOs are able to get with these little locations around IV. So overall, I'm excited with the direction we're heading, and excited to keep the conversation going about making it even better.
Great.
Are there any public comments regarding this item, the Community Service Officer Safety Station Report? Not seeing anything in the comments. I'm not seeing anyone raising their hand. In that case, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And I'm going to ask our board, I think it would be good to have a motion to direct staff to extend the agreement that we have with UCPD, and to bring us back a list of goals that we'd like to have accomplished in over the next fiscal year.
Cool. So I'll make that motion. I'll see what Jonathan types up, and then we can go from there.
Okay, motion is made by Bertrand. Is there a second from the board?
I will second.
Seconded by Freeman. So the motion is to bring back a 2020-2021 contract with UCPD and a list of goals for the next year of the program. Is that kosher with the maker and seconder?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. And I think in staff's discussion with UCPD, they'll be able to figure out any updates and changes from our existing agreement for us to consider based on the discussion we had tonight, such as any possible expansions or just anything new to augment the existing efforts.
I agree with that assessment. Okay. In that case, is there any further public comment on this item?
Hey, Spencer, it's Deputy Schroeder. If I could just have about 15 seconds.
Go ahead, Deputy Schroeder.
Yes, just in the public safety realm, there's sometimes friendly disputes between different agencies. However, in this case, we at the Sheriff's Department fully support this program. We think it's awesome. I've been out there many weekends in plain clothes and notice a change in behavior around these safety stations. I just think it's a great thing that UCPD is doing. I want to thank them, and I want to thank you guys for supporting the program.
Thank you, Deputy Schroeder. Okay, with that, we're going to call the question to a vote. Jonathan, can you call the roll?
My bad, I was on mute. Director Brandt,
Yes.
Director Freeman,
Yes.
Director Thurlow. Oh, is he back on mute?
He is recusing.
He's recused.
He's recusing, that's right. I have it written right there. Director Geis
Yes.
and Director Bertrand
Yes.
and Director Nguyen and Hedges are not going to be joining us. Director Nguyen just told me she won't be joining the meeting at all today.
Okay, motion passes 4-0 with one recusal and 2 absences. Thank you to our UCPD for this report. And again, please convey our sincerest gratitude to our CSO community.
Well, thank you.
Okay, with that, we are going to move on to the next item, which is the Isla Vista or Interpersonal Violence Investigator Program Review. So I want to hand it over to you, Jonathan.
Great. So this is the first full review of the program. The contract is running out at the end of June, and it was a 2-year contract. So we've been in this since October of 2018 and through now. And so this is the review that Covina Avila, our detective for the program, has prepared with the different reports that you've had monthly, and now there's a aggregated one similar to the safety station one. So I'll turn it over to Dave and Covina to give us the rundown of what the last, I guess, year and a half of the program has been.
Okay, Jonathan, thanks. I did make there was another part made for the UCPD case percentages for the cases the types of cases that we've worked in Isla Vista. I inadvertently put the wrong date on there. It's actually January 2019 to current.
Okay.
So in looking at this, when we look at the cases that we've investigated in Isla Vista, we're seeing that 53% of them are sexual assaults, and some of the sexual assaults are of the nature of rapes and other forms of sexual assaults. And then, of course, some that we've classified as incidents, that's about 21% of the 19 cases. And some of those include, I didn't put the exact, but, annoying phone calls and some texts and some other cases like that. Domestic violence, we don't see that much. It was 16% of the cases that were worked. And then stalking was 11%. So that just kind of gives you an overview of where we're at in the cases that we're seeing the most of in Isla Vista, which of course just the sexual assault covers several areas, which is more than half of what we've worked on in Isla Vista. So Covina she'll give a rundown of those cases shortly. And then on the community outreach and education and training projects, I've got a bar graph made of that to look at the things we're doing by the months. And then what I did was I went through and I broke down by the months of items that we're doing, trainings, talks, and many things that have been going on. Covina can probably speak directly to a lot of that. So I tried to make it simplify it to so we're able to look at it and decipher a lot of information on a couple of pages. I think it's been going well as well. Covina has immersed herself in many aspects with many of our resources in the county that can directly relate to things that are going on in Isla Vista. We've maintained partnerships with SBCC, other entities on campus. So she's become a one-stop shop person to connect folks with resources, which is really beneficial with that. And then most of the time, she'll have her partner, which is Detective Doherty, will come along also. So it's kind of, in some aspects, sometimes it's a 2-for-1 when we go to a lot of these meetings and we do a lot of these talks, supporting the position and with the IVCSD. Hopefully Covina, she'll be able to talk some more about these things, but as you go through the list here, there's a lot of things in here that may not seem like they cross over, but in essence they do cross over because of the population in Isla Vista and because of the amount of students that we're dealing with that do go to UCSB and SBCC. And what's great about that is Covina has connected with SBCC and again had meetings with Linda Dozier down there to directly address some of the things that have been happening in Isla Vista with the students as well. So Covina, I'll let you take over.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you all virtually. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to explain a little bit more in detail. Can everyone see and hear me all right?
Yes, yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to go over the last fiscal year, July 1st until current. We had 9 closed cases. Of those 9 closed cases, 5 of them were sexual assaults. One of them, we are survivor centered, so we will obviously take reports for documentation only, as well as if a survivor wanted to move forward with an investigation. During this last fiscal year, only one of those cases, the survivor wanted to move forward with an investigation, and that was rejected by the DA. The other 4 came in with the intention from the beginning to file a report with me and do a trauma-informed interview with me for documentation only. There's many reasons why survivors choose to do documentation only. 2 of the most common ones is, well, there's many reasons. They're not ready to move forward yet, and since the statute of limitations on sexual assault has been removed, you know, they can take their time. They can report in 10 years, they can report in 20 years. So the 4 that we had documentation only, I think when you have a sexual assault, we also provide the survivor a copy of their initial report. That report can be used for a Title IX investigation, and it can also be used to greatly help and speed the process of retrieving a civil restraining order, which, you know, which will help them to provide security in getting that restraining order if they have this report. It will only help corroborate their statements with the police report that we issue them. We had 2 domestic violence closed cases since July 1st. This is a little tricky because I really appreciate what CARE and STESA have done. They have actually informed the survivor beforehand so that we are still survivor centered, that they withhold the suspect's name or say they're talking about a friend or asking for a friend or just want to talk to Detective Avila. And then say they just want a report for documentation only, because we are mandated to do an investigation with domestic violence. So even though these would have previously gone to the district, been investigated and gone to the district attorney's office, the advocates are doing this new thing so that the survivor is still has power over what happened to them and can move forward with however they want with that. So those did not go to the DA's office because of the survivor's wishes. We had 2 other incidents that were not sent to the district attorney's office because they just did not reach elements of certain crimes that we needed. We currently have 8 open cases. Right now, there are 3 sexual assault open cases. One of them is awaiting the survivor decision. We like to update our survivors every step of the way because the unknown is really scary. And so we like to inform them when we're going to submit a report to the district attorney's office, because once a report goes to the district attorney's office, it is basically the suspect versus the people of California. And a lot of that power is removed from the survivor. So we just let them know before we're going to send it to the district attorney's office. And in one of the ones, she just wanted more time to think. So we're sitting on that one until we hear back from her, and then we'll move forward however she wishes. That 19-1249. That one, we are also awaiting to hear back from the survivor. 20-0143. That one, right now, it's unfortunate during COVID, the best time, we obviously would love to meet with witnesses in person, and same with suspect interviews. There is a lot of nonverbal cues that we can pick up on, a lot of them that, we've been trained to kind of see deception if there's a certain pattern. So these witness and suspect interviews on this case have been put on hold for COVID until we can move forward with in-person interviews. Obviously, if there was a threat to the community, we'd interview them with masks and gloves and keep our distance. But the survivors have been updated in these cases. The one domestic violence case was actually a Santa Barbara City College student. Oh, and excuse me, one of the closed sexual assaults was actually a Santa Barbara City College student, and this domestic violence was a Santa Barbara City College student. There was a non-existent relationship with Santa Barbara City College, and right now it is beyond blooming. We have a great relationship with Santa Barbara City College in Title IX, so that, obviously many of our community are also students of Santa Barbara City College. And so now working with Linda Dozer, who's the Title IX coordinator, and she's just been wonderful. She will provide resources if for this domestic violence, there was a temporary restraining order. She was able to secure the security guards to walk her to and from her vehicle. Also allowed more time on finals when this happened. It's just been so wonderful to be able to have the same relationship we have with our resources here at Santa Barbara City College. That's been great. That case, though, was a felony domestic violence arrest, and then an emergency protective order violation with other things. And the DA charged are filed 4 charges. Unfortunately, since COVID, all court cases are kind of until further notice, but currently it is in the readiness and settlement process. Let's see. Same with this stalking case, the 0515. That was a stalking that led to an arrest and an EPO violation and a temporary restraining order violation. I wrote 2 warrants, submitted to the district attorney, and they filed 2 charges. That is also in RNS and is just kind of held until further notice when the courts open again. We put our annoying and harassing communication under stalking because it's such a huge precursor to stalking. In many of our felony stalking cases, we see this annoying and harassing communication. If someone tried emailing them and they didn't respond, then they'll try a different avenue like Snapchat or Instagram. And it's a huge red flag for the focus that this person has on another person. So I put that one under stalking. And that one, the investigation is ongoing. That one, we've had a few search warrants written. We've gotten some back. We have a couple that we're going to have to write again. We haven't heard back from a couple. So that one is a lot of paper that has to be done. And then our 2 incidents that we just have witness interviews to do on that first one. And on this second one, have to write a warrant and then hopefully do a suspect interview after COVID. So that's what our closed and open cases since July 1st. I know here I'm going to talk about our outreach done by the detectives, and I tried to do it in quarters so we didn't have to go month by month. So October, November, and December of 2018, we did 8 Greek talks, 8 safety talks to Greek life, 5 RAD classes, 5 community meetings, and I kind of lumped together our sexual assault response team, sexual harassment, sexual violence meetings, our CCRT, which is the community coordinated response team meetings. So those are kind of what I lumped together for community meetings. And then 1 outreach, which was the Coffee with the Cop. January, February, and March of 2019, we had 4 safety talks that included Greek life and sports team. I believe it was rugby and rowing team. In 1 community meeting, 6 outreach, and I am, again, CFIT trained and I can do those child forensic interviews. So I did 2 body safety. Body safety is the new term that we're using for good touch, bad touch, because bad touch can mean many things. And in April, May, and June of 2019, we did 1 Greek life talk, 8 RAD classes, and 2 outreaches. In July, August, and September of 2019, there were 8 outreach. October, November, December of 2019, 2 Greek life safety talks, and 1 safety talk for EVPLA. 8 RAD classes, 11 community meetings, and 4 body safety talks. In January, February, and March of 2020, we had 6 community meetings. Obviously, there's not a lot under that quarter since the students are gone and because of COVID. Within that, some things I just like to highlight is Detective Doherty and myself, when we hire new officers, they spend 8 hours with us on sexual assault, domestic violence, and stalking. So we trained all the new officers, and we facilitated shift briefings with SASA, which they did a wonderful job, CARE, and I'm trying to remember who else. It's escaped my mind. And then SASA and I actually worked on posters. They really spearheaded working on these posters, which I think really helped, that really kind of outlined what they can report and basically what power they have when they report. So they really spearheaded informing the community that you can come to the police department and get a sexual assault report and have it just documentation only. I think that there's a huge idea, which I don't blame anyone, it's out there, a huge idea that if they come to the police department, it's going to get investigated. And there's so many reasons why a survivor wouldn't want that. So they did a great job. And I think just the information getting out there that we can take sexual assaults for documentation only is probably why we had an increased number of documentation only sexual assaults. And when they come to us, I just really appreciate it because we can get them more resources and we can provide them that report that can help them with a Title IX case and, again, that temporary restraining order. And then I think one of the other things that you all asked for is kind of things that we think went well and things that we can work on. I definitely think some things that were good was just that relationship with Santa Barbara City College so that we can serve the Santa Barbara City College students. It's taken a while, but it is just beautiful right now. Whenever they get a case or whenever we get something, we can't share public information, obviously, but we can ask for resources, and then I tell them about Linda Dozer and they'll go see her, or she'll give them my work cell phone number, and then we can communicate that way. And that is just probably the best networking that we've done, and I've really seen it work out really well. The increase in documentation only cases, I think obviously SASA with that poster informing the community that you can report to the police department and have your report for documentation only, minus the mandates, of course. And I think the advocates are really doing a great job educating themselves on that as well. And I think one of the things that, where is it? I think, have a need to work on is our safety talks. We had 38 last fiscal year. Or I'm sorry, we had 14 last fiscal year or last school year, and we had this school year. And I think there's a couple reasons why we got less. Obviously, the Greek life, like sororities and fraternities, students can be a part of those organizations for like 2 years, 4 years. And since they just had it, and most of the groups that we spoke to were the whole houses, that maybe they just wanted something different. So I think kind of looking into what else we can talk about in our safety talks that isn't necessarily the same topics and curriculum that we have been doing. And I think the other thing too was we did have that, that case that went public with the drugging in the fraternities, and a lot of the fraternities put themselves on a more self-imposed moratorium. There was an arrest and there was a search warrant of a frat house. So I think, we're still the police, but I think that probably had a lot to do with why we didn't get as many people to respond. Because on September 3rd, I sent out an email to 38 people, being the presidents of Greek life and or the risk management managers' emails. So that was just a very big difference. So maybe we could work on different topics and then try that again next year. And let's see. Just work on continuing to educate the community about this position and reporting options. I think the reporting options is huge. Obviously, we've seen such a difference, and it's great. I don't know, maybe utilizing our social media or just being more open to, hopefully if some people reach out, they can get that information out there. I always try to speak to students if they want to interview me for their papers, because it's just I enjoy doing that, but it's just another way to get it out there, what we do. And each case is so unique. Just saying that we can do these things, we might be able to do even more. It might look a little different because each case is so delicate and so unique. And I know that you all had asked about any domestic violence outreach during this COVID time. It's a very, very sad time. Unfortunately, we don't have any outreach for domestic violence during this time. I've been in contact with CARE, I've been in contact with STESA, and I've been in contact with DV Solutions, Domestic Violence Solutions. We're kind of in the brainstorming phases of what would work best, but we are definitely all in communication. I have a Zoom meeting with STESA next week, and then DV Solutions is just going to keep me in the loop. CARE's been so wonderful. I think all the advocacy centers just really appreciated the outreach to see what can we do together during this hard time. DV Solutions actually just created a flyer specifically for COVID, showing that they can have virtual meetings, that their shelters are still open, but they're skipping beds to have that 6 feet distance from each other. They're utilizing local hotels so that they can still get people out of a dangerous situation. So I think I sent that out to the entire department, and I believe we are going to or have already posted it on our Instagram. I think we just have to get that information out there because it's so prevalent at this time. But other than that, we're in the brainstorming phases with these other advocacy centers, and hopefully we'll come up with something and we can start moving forward with it. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you, Detective Avila. I just want to say at the outset that the work that you do is incredibly important for our community. I think that it means a lot to so many Isla Vistans to know that there is an individual as dedicated as you are to trying to bring justice to these crimes, which are often the most overlooked in our society, and our culture, really, our sexist culture, does not talk about them as much as it should. And we really appreciate your service, and just everything that you bring to the community. I think makes me feel better, falling asleep at night, that you're there helping support our residents. So first, I just want to say a big thank you to you.
Oh, thank you so much. That is very, very, very sweet. I love what I do, and thank you for the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. I want to open it up to board members for any questions that you may have for not just Kavina, but the rest of the department. And I'm going to go over to Director Freeman first.
Well, I just have really just one quick question. So when we had initially worked on negotiating this the contract for this, so one of the things that had come up is the idea that you might get taken by the essentially by the rest of the department for some other kind of prioritized case, or that they might essentially reutilize your services. It could be that I'm misremembering. So I'm just wanting to verify that that didn't happen. Like, you were actually able to concentrate all of your time and effort on your work and mission.
Yes, absolutely. We all work together, but I actually, this year, I'd have to say, we probably stole a couple of the other detectives to help us with some search warrants and some arrests that were made. We all work together, but yeah, I'd have to say we probably stole them more this year.
Right, that's great to hear. Thank you so much.
I do want to jump in real quickly and follow up on that question. And so this is, I guess, a question for Lieutenant Millard or someone else in the department, because one of the March report notes at the bottom that that the interpersonal violence investigator position has been reassigned upon or along with a number of other department positions due to the pandemic. And I just want to get clarification on that, because that is a little bit concerning to me.
I'd be happy to answer that. So I'm not technically in my office anymore. I'm out on patrol. All the detectives are. There's some benefits to that we can actually, when we hear a call under the interpersonal violence umbrella, that myself, Detective Doherty, or any of the other detectives, we're on opposite shifts. We cover all the day shifts, can actually respond to it and probably handle it from start to finish. It's probably just a change in my hours, but I'm still on UCSB campus. On April 4th, I actually, on April 4th, I had an email exchange with the assistant director of care. And we kind of brainstormed, how are we going to move forward with this? And we've made ourselves available that if a survivor wants to report an incident over Zoom at any time, even if it's beyond our now patrol shift, if it's on a weekend, a night, or a day, they can contact us, and we'd be happy at any time to do that Zoom meeting for that trauma-informed interview. So that is for Detective Doherty and myself. If one of us isn't available, one of us essentially will be able to take that Zoom call from the beginning if they came into care first, which is kind of like what we did. We took a lot of initial reports in the beginning when they did come into care. So that is we are still available for initials. The only things that are really paused is the witness interviews and the suspect interviews, unless it is something exigent or a threat to the community. Because I think it might actually hurt a case if we did over the phone suspect interview when we had the opportunity to have an in-person interview. So yes, my hours have changed, and but we're still available. We're still on call like we were before.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Lieutenant Millard's trying to speak, but he's on mute.
Oh, okay. I'll go over to Lieutenant Millard. Jonathan, do you think you can unmute him? Is that something you have the power to do?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Now I was muted, and I was telling you I'm going to unmute him right now. There we go.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, her hours have definitely changed. She's working more hours now, unfortunately, during the day than what she was. So she is still available. And as with most agencies around the nation, and we're included in that too, we've had to do some realignment due to the pandemic. But that doesn't mean that the service that Covina and the rest can provide have diminished. You know, some things have diminished with the ongoing cases because difficulties do come up with trying to do a Zoom interview, and it's sometimes that's just not conducive to that person-to-person contact. But the good point is that she has maintained communication with some of the survivors in some of these cases. They've had back and forth communication going on. But a benefit to that as well is again, Covina is specifically assigned to the IVCSD as the investigator, but there is a whole team behind her as well, and we're a local team that is in the area, and so you end up getting quite a bit of resources that go along with that with her. And we do have the development of our community outreach team, to which we have been collaborating with Covina and collaborating when we could with the fraternities and sororities to try and look at a different approach to get in there and talk with them from a risk management standpoint, and then include our detective in there to talk with some more stuff, or your detective to talk with some more stuff. But when cases come in, they'll be assigned to the appropriate person, which will be Covina, and we'll continue to interact with the victims. But unfortunately, during these unprecedented, uncharted times, there has been some realignment, but that hasn't diminished her availability to do what she's tasked to do for the IVCSD.
Okay, thank you for that, Lieutenant Millard. I think it's important that people know that investigations and that the police department is still there to support survivors and solve these pressing crimes during this pandemic.
Yep.
I have another question that was something that Detective Avila mentioned in her report regarding the warrant that was served, the arrest that was made regarding a fraternity in Isla Vista. And I'm wondering, is that something that was served by UCPD and a part of this program?
I actually don't think that was one of our stats, because Detective Peterson was head on that case. But I guess it happened in IV. We could use it, but we all worked on it. He wrote the warrant. I wrote the ops plan. We were all there, and it just happened, obviously, to be in the Isla Vista area. That is a very good point. I should call you a detective. I didn't even put that in any of these. But, our communities are so close together that anywhere it's going to benefit the other community. But yes, this was in Isla Vista, but this was not my case, but we do help each other out. And so I wrote the ops plan. He wrote the arrest warrant, and we all went in. So I don't really know how to follow up on that. I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay. I guess I was just more curious because before I get into that point, I just want to say again, and I think the board will remember that we felt this way when we first created this program, which is that we were very enthused by the fact that it sounds like on the ground level, UCPD and the sheriff's office officers work really collaboratively together to solve these problems and make the public more safe. And I just think that that's a great hearing. And it's good to hear that punctuated from you. No, I think the reason I'm curious is because it's clear that there is a problem within the fraternity community in Isla Vista, and sexual violence, and particularly the way that women in our community are being treated. And it sounds like you two are a little vexed and concerned over this, given that it sounds like there wasn't as much responsiveness on the fraternity community's behalf when it came to the trainings that you're providing. I guess I just want to get an idea from you all as the public safety experts, if there's something that you think we as policymakers can do to try and move the needle. Because really, when I hear that we had even just a lower response rate in terms of receiving these important trainings that you're providing, that's a little depressing and perplexing to me, and very frustrating. So I guess whoever wants to go ahead.
The hardest part about these safety talks is, we try to make them in like a circular setting where everyone can ask questions while we're giving information. So it's not like death by PowerPoint. But the hardest part about it is we have this information, but trying to get people to sign up and request and have us come out. That is where we could probably really maybe all brainstorm together. Yika from EVPLA did such a great job getting that information out. I could at least contribute 2 of our talks last school year specifically to her, because she just knew the people. She knew the people in charge that could coordinate these efforts in groups that we could speak to. But yeah, I don't have that, I guess, popularity or social base where I can get people to want to listen to us. Deputy Schroeder showed up. We've invited him to a few, and DA Carl Barnes, we have a DA that comes to these safety talks as well. So there's different lenses and a lot of benefits from people coming to them, but getting people to sign up and inquire and respond to my emails is another thing. So I think that's what we really need to work on, and I just don't know how.
I think that is challenging as well. Fortunately, something that goes with this and complements it is, the UCPD community outreach team. And we have a member of the team that was involved in the upper echelons of Greek life just a few short years ago when she was in college. So she has been, prior to everything shutting down, she was definitely making some inroads in contacting some sororities in the upper echelons in Greek life to try and move some of this forward, some of these safety talks forward. Some things that we have moved forward from that standpoint on campus that can directly relate to Isla Vista is athletic talks for sports teams. So when we do that, working with Tom Hastings from UCSB, most of those sports teams, they're all present when we go and talk to them. And a lot of those folks live in Isla Vista. So we're looking at trying to make some of those connections for the folks that may be part of Greek life there as well. So we're attacking this one singular item with many things. We're trying to figure out what is the right combination in working with many folks. We're definitely open to suggestions. Sometimes reaching folks can be challenging, especially some of the Greek life with the incident that we had happen that we mentioned already with the date rape, the drugs, the search warrant, the arrest at a fraternity. I'm sure that spread pretty fast, and their self-imposed moratorium. There was quite a bit of activity with that on campus and within Isla Vista. So I think some of that can contribute as well, but it's not that we're not going to stop. We're going to continue to try to make those inroads and make those connections with folks. Once they meet us, I think it could be a different story, singularly or collective as a group, to succeed in our endeavors of getting the message out there for the resources that are available and maybe some tips.
Thank you, Detective Avila and Lieutenant Lamard for that. And I'm glad. I just want to say, really glad that sports teams. I know that's something that you've been doing since the program began, and would encourage, if at all possible, to branch out not just from our Division I teams, but to our club teams as well. There are many club teams in Isla Vista that really do have that communal aspect to them. And I think that wherever possible, where we can identify these communities that have that communal aspect, it'll be easier for you to be able to get in there, spread the information. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here on this one, but glad that that is something that you are considering in your outreach as well.
Yeah, I think it all ties together with trying to get a foothold in some places in Isla Vista and reach some of the folks there as well.
Okay, are there any other?
May?
Go ahead, Director Bertrand.
Thank you. Well, Detective Avila, thank you so much for all the great work you're doing in our community. It's always just such a pleasure to see what you're up to and really to see the difference that you're making. So thank you. As far as your update on what's going really well and what is the plan for working on ahead, I'm especially pleased to hear about the relationship with Santa Barbara City College. That's something that for a long time has been lacking. So that's great to hear that you've been working on it. It's also great to hear that you have garnered this support and trust of more and more survivors in coming forward, even when they just want to do a documentation only case. It takes an incredible amount of courage for someone to come forward, especially to a law enforcement officer. So since you've been able to build those relationships, I really think that's very valuable for our community. In a lot of the services that we provide, there's often the assumption by certain community members that we're really here to just serve UCSB students, but this program is a great example of us serving the whole community, not only Santa Barbara City College, but also, as you mentioned, going to Isla Vista Elementary and our various youth providers with your body safety trainings. So overall, I think this is very encouraging to hear. It's such important work. At our first meeting of our board back in March 7th of 2017, we had a survivor speak, and it was one of the first direct asks of our district. And that survivor made it very clear that we had inadequate services in our community for survivors, and that it was really incumbent upon all of us working in Isla Vista to help better serve survivors and prevent and respond to acts of interpersonal violence. And I think we're really doing that with this program. I think that for a long time, college communities around the nation have not properly dealt with interpersonal violence. And I think that by us having a dedicated investigator who's also working on prevention in our community, I really think that we're setting a good example for other college communities as well. So thank you so much for all that you're doing. As far as the current situation with the assignment, like I definitely understand that all government agencies are responding to unprecedented situation and having to change staffing models. I know that I have our MOU in front of me right now, and per Section 3B, we do have to be careful just to make sure that anything that the district is paying for is related specifically to this service, and I'm sure our agency accomplish just that. But overall, I think we want to be the best partners we can going forward to see how we can reach more folks and best protect and serve the community. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben. That was very nice.
Thank you, Director Bertrand. Are there any other board comments on this item? Okay, seeing that, I'm going to open it up to the public. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing and hearing none, I'm going to bring it back to the board. I think that moving forward, we should direct staff to continue to work with UCPD regarding this reassignment issue and see what it is that we can do, because I too am a little concerned about just legally how it works for us and our charter, which says that we can't be supplanting services. So I want to try and get that squared away, but on whole, I'm very supportive of this program and the work that Kavina and the UC Police Department is doing in the community to support survivors. And I think that we should continue that going forward. So I don't know if anyone has
Spencer,
a
I have
motion.
one more comment. Sorry, I missed one of my notes. But in the on the topic of how we can reach more people, especially with education, one idea that I have is right now we're moving to a time when many leases are turning over and new people will begin their housing leases at new homes. And during that time, the property management companies provide a lot of information to their new tenants, their new residents. And if we could work with the property owners and managers to provide specific information about resources that are available for people who experience interpersonal violence, I think that would be an awesome way to engage. Additionally, I've noticed that more and more syllabuses at UC Santa Barbara, documents that professors put out at the beginning of the quarter, more and more of those have information on resources that are available for survivors. It might be quite interesting if we could see if there would be property owners in the future who are interested in putting information about resources in their leases, so that when people are signing leases and moving into new housing, especially those who are coming into the community for the first time, they at least have some education about the resources that are available to help them. So just two ideas on how we might want to further get the word out about how we can best support survivors in our community.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Ethan. I think that I think we should incorporate that. I see Jonathan starting to write up what I had mentioned as a motion, but if anyone else would like to make it, what I'd really like to see come out of this is that we put similar to the UCPD item or the safety station item, that we have staff bring back some goals for the program for this fiscal year, and that we review the MOU that we have and then bring it back to the board for approval, with special attention given to this reassignment issue and how everything COVID-19 related is impacting. So I know there's a lot, but
Quick question.
if anyone on the board has.
Did you want it to be like pretty much the same thing as this one plus the reassignment is what you said? Spencer, you said it was
yeah, I think that would work for me.
Did that work?
Yeah, that would work for me. I don't know if anyone wants to make that motion.
Yes, I'm happy to make the motion, but if I could make an amendment to, rather than regarding the reassignment issue, maybe say direct staff to continue to work with UCPD, and then the language you have there about the 2020, 2021 contract and list of goals, and then at the end mention and work to ensure the continuance of service during COVID-19. Something like that, just so it's specific and or yeah, I guess that's my thought there.
Great.
I agree. I think that's a more succinct way, or a more clear way of putting what I was trying to get at.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so made by Bertrand. Is there a second?
I will second.
Seconded by Freeman. Okay, is there any public comment regarding the motion? Okay, is there any further board discussion on the motion at hand? Okay, well then with that, I think we'll ask Jonathan to bring us to a roll call vote.
Okay, Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Thurlow is recused. Director Geis?
Yes.
Director Bertrand?
Yes.
And Director Nguyen is absent.
Motion passes 4-0 with 2 absences and 1 recusal. Thank you so much, Detective Avila, again, for the important work that you do for our community, and to the UC Police Department for continuing to uphold public safety during these strange and uncertain times.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we are going to move along on the agenda. And we are going to, let's see. I think in the interest of time, because I think we had some folks from the members of the public who were here for a specific item. I'm going to move over to item 4.5, which is houselessness in Isla Vista.
Great. So a couple of our board members asked us that we get an agenda item on our agenda this week about just the current state of homelessness in Isla Vista during COVID-19 and how we can do more as a community services district to serve the community. What we have been doing right now is we launched the service center at the Isla Vista Community Center, which is a continuation of the coordinated entry hours that we usually do in our district office. But what we do now in addition is we provide Wi-Fi to people to connect to. We give information about the economic impact payment. We distribute food, about 40 meals per session. And so we, hygiene kits and masks have been distributed as well. So that was the first week, last week of us doing something. And obviously the encampment issue, there is a lot of need there. And I know Director Bertrand went and toured the encampments a bit this last weekend and noticed a lot. And been contacted by different from the Ivy Record Park District to Food Not Bombs, who've had different requests or need of support from the Community Services District. So here is an item for you all to discuss and give me direction of how we can best move forward as a district based on what's going on right now.
Thank you, Jonathan. I just want to say at the outset that I too have noticed that houselessness continues to be an issue in Isla Vista. And it's one of those issues, I think, like a lot of things in our society, that is now super punctuated because of this pandemic crisis. And I think that it's especially making us think in new ways about our actions as government and how they relate to not just the concerns of us as a government, but to the public health and to the broader interconnectedness that we all have. So I'm really excited about what we've been able to do so far with the coordinated entry hours. I'm really looking to see what can we do to try and move that forward even more. It seems to me like we've got these 2 days a week so far where we've got folks being able to be served with meals, where they're able to file their IRS forms so that they can receive their stimulus checks, and where they're able to get into the coordinated entry system, which they have to be in if they are going to be rehoused by the Project Turnkey Hotel program, as it is too. So I really want to see how we can move that forward even more. And I'm excited for what's been put together so far. I want to open it up to other members of the board if anyone else has any comments.
Yes, may I, Spencer?
Go ahead, Director Bertrand.
Thank you. So first, I just really want to thank our staff, Jonathan, Deborah, all of our interns, and our partners at United Way. Our district has really stepped up in spearheading the homeless services support site in Isla Vista. This is something that communities around the county are working on, and we really got it up and running right away. So I think we're providing a tremendous benefit by serving our houseless neighbors 2 days a week at the community center. It sounds like it's going very well. Additionally, on another day of the week, there's the Showers of Blessing program in Isla Vista on Mondays, and that also functions as a homeless support site, in addition to the other more grassroots efforts that take place, the various meals that are served and other support offered by community groups. It's no secret right now that what we're seeing is quite different than our usual situation. Homelessness is always a challenge and issue in Isla Vista, but right now it's being exacerbated and it's much more out in the open. And I think it's incumbent upon us to work to see how we can best provide services to our neighbors who are without homes during this time. While some of these folks may be able to be housed in emergency housing, we know that the majority of folks who are unhoused right now will remain unhoused throughout the COVID-19 crisis. So with that in mind, I think we really want to focus on how we can help support this population that's particularly vulnerable during this time, how we can help perhaps stabilize some of the issues that are going on, and just help people be as safe as possible where they're at. And to do that, I really think that we should look to see how we can expand the services that we're already providing. And like I said before, I think we're doing a great job right now, and I think a lot of people are noticing that. But if we can increase those services up to even providing service most days of the week, perhaps with various organizations, I think that'll go a long way, just because we know that our folks who are without homes are here every day and they have needs every day. And we want to make sure that we're able to serve them to make sure that some of the issues that we're seeing can perhaps not occur at the rate that they're occurring right now. So those are my opening comments. I also want to thank Peggy Sutar, Director of Isla Vista Recreation and Park District. Her and I have spoken really extensively on this, and she's been nice enough to spend some time with me around the parks, just really looking at the situation. But overall, I think that we are doing a good job, and there's great potential for increased service to really make a difference in these folks' lives during this tough time.
Thank you, Director Bertrand. Are there other members of the board that would like to speak? Okay. Then with that, I want to open it up for the public comment. Any members of the public that would like to speak? Jonathan, I think you mentioned there was one person who'd fill out the form first off. Jonathan, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, it was Janet Stitch, and I did email her to follow up on her comment, and I haven't heard back from her yet. And she didn't leave anything specific in the form. She just said she wants to speak on this item. So I don't have that. I do have somebody from Food Not Bombs who also emailed me a short comment, but didn't fill out the form. And what she said, she's one of the coordinators that puts it together. She says, I won't be able to join public comment. We've been asking houseless folks what other services items they need while we serve them food. We've noticed that many of them are suffering from what appears to be malnourishment, and we're worried that people might be falling ill. We're wondering if it would be possible to have a nurse come through the parks and provide checkups. Perhaps this is already happening, I'm not sure. But I think that there are some people seriously suffering in the parks. Besides healthcare, people have also requested sleeping bags, blankets, solar chargers, wipes, hand sanitizers, masks, backpacks, and tote bags, and small flashlights. And if you have any ideas on how to get these to folks or looking to donate them, please let me know. That was her comment that she said.
And Jonathan, in direct response on that, could you tell us a little bit more? I know you all have been distributing hygiene kits at the support center. Can you tell the group about what that's like?
Yeah, we have the hygiene kits. It's pretty much like a Ziploc bag that has a bunch of different supplies in it. And I think they had hand sanitizer on Friday, but it does have wipes, and it does have just other, little supplies that people could use to keep hygienic during these times.
Thank you.
And those have been provided from the United Way. And we also did have masks for people to distribute as well. So we were getting those two out to people this last week. And I need to check in with Emily in terms of supplies, because a lot of these are supplies based on what is able to be acquired. Like, for example, the lunches were donated by the Miramar last week, and I think there's another source for the lunches this week now. So it's also kind of being built as we go still a little bit.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Again, I'll say, I think I'll open it up. General public comment on this item. Are there any members of the public here that would like to speak? You can either drop something in the chat or you can unmute yourself and say something.
It's me, Peggy.
Hi, Peggy. Go right ahead.
Hey, guys. I'm not going to say a lot, but I do think it would be helpful if we had some health workers go to the different camps, because I think that some of them are in need for more than food. I think services around mental health and things like that are really important right now. And I don't know if the ones that are really needing things are going to be able to make it over to the community center. And Ethan knows, I showed Ethan where a lot of folks are at. But if somebody can send like some health workers around to the different encampments right now and check on them, there could be people. I mean, I don't know what type of sick people are that somebody else alluded to, but yeah, that would be good if someone could do this, because again, we are a recreation and park district and we don't do social services, and we are struggling with this. So any kind of help you guys can offer to get people what they need, and as much as possible that we can get people out of the parks and inside where they have care, that is also would be really good. I understand the need to leave people in place, but let's just have someone do like home checks on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. And I appreciate those comments about really wanting to make sure that we have field work, I guess, as I would call it, being done. And I think, Jonathan, maybe this is a question for you, because it's my understanding that some of that is happening now between United Way and also, I think, from County Bewell.
Yeah, there is some happening, and during our 12:30 to 2:30 hours, when it does get slow at the community center, the AmeriCorps members do make their rounds around the park and hand out some lunches, and so we do some field work, but not. I don't believe, and I'm going to confirm this at the call tomorrow, and we can move forward on this healthcare issue more. But I'm going to on the county homelessness call at 11 a.m. tomorrow. I'll ask about what exactly has happened in Isla Vista that they have on record, and then what we can do moving forward.
Thank you for that, Jonathan.
Looks like Bob is on. Let me unmute him real quick. He has his hand up.
First, Peggy, did I hear you for a second right now?
I'm good. I just, like I said, I think healthcare right now is really important. And the people that are on the outlying areas and not just in the downtown parks are probably the ones that are going to need it. Thanks.
Thank you, Peggy. Okay, Bob, you get yourself unmuted. Go right ahead.
Yeah. So, my thoughts here about our agency, I don't think we're in a position to be a healthcare service agency either. I don't think we have the expertise to do that. And I don't know, it sounds like, before we start dealing with the homeless population, we should try and be getting them tested and know if COVID's out in those homeless communities. It seems like it's kind of like the nursing home. It's a very vulnerable population to get COVID. And then I start worrying about, our AmeriCorps employees, our employees by, we don't have any personal protective gear in terms of distributing, lunches and opening up our building to the homeless. I just think it's not at least my area expertise, and I don't know, what part of the county government is responsible for that, that difficult problem of responding to the homeless population. But I think we need to be very careful about protecting us in our environment too. I just don't think our staff should be the ones that are going out into that homeless community to solve that problem. But I don't have a solution though either.
Yeah, and Bob, I'll clarify from like my comments. Right now, what's happening is we have AmeriCorps workers who are trained to serve members of our community experiencing homelessness, and they're really on the front line of this service right now in Isla Vista and communities around the county. So I'm not necessarily proposing that, well, I'm not proposing that we have our staff directly providing service, but what I am proposing is that we figure out if we are able to increase the support that we're providing to these service providers who do this professionally, such as through the community service center that we're operating right now. I think that would be really good because right now we're seeing that being effective. So if we're able to amplify that, if there's capacity to do it, I think we'd make a big difference.
Yeah. I guess my comments are I've seen that homeless population migrating right back towards, the community center. They're hanging out there now. They're a vulnerable population. They could be carrying disease that's easily could be spread. They're not practicing social distancing. And so I think I just worry that, we're inviting that problem into our camp and, but I don't know how to deal with it, but I just worry about it.
Bob, I think that you, I don't necessarily agree with, I guess, where you're taking it, but I think that you are hitting on something that's important to understand, which is that we don't really have a whole lot of great choices right now, especially given the pandemic environment, upon what to do. We have some improvements, meaning that those of our houseless community that are ill are able to get in the system and utilize a hotel room if they so wish. But we're also sort of in a situation where there's not a whole lot that we can do once an encampment has started, other than try and make sure that that encampment is as safe as possible, as healthy as possible, and has the resources and the knowledge of what's going on. So I think that really I'm trying to look at this from a harm reduction viewpoint, and I think that doing all the more that we can to provide these things. I know Jonathan mentioned from the public comment, sleeping bags, blankets, and small flashlights. Maybe that's something that we can look at in terms of if that's worth it to be distributed. I know the Rec and Park District is grappling with these issues, and they are indeed a challenge. And they've put forward some ideas regarding possibly moving people around in order to try and enforce a higher level and a more enlightened level of social distancing. And I think that there's the possibility that something like that could work out really well. There's also the possibility that it becomes just as challenging as the current situation. So, really, I want our district to be working collaboratively with them as much as possible throughout this, because it's a challenge all around. But we also want to make sure that our houseless neighbors are able to survive this pandemic. And I think that that's something where we really can play a role in. And I'm really glad we've got this existing partnership with AmeriCorps, where we've had their members on the ground building relationships with our houseless community and doing this outreach and coordinated entry work for a long time before this pandemic even started to take place. So I think it's a natural building place is how I see it. Are there any other board members that wish to speak? Okay,
Spencer, Ethan here. I know Director Freeman was involved in discussion last week at IV Rec and Parks District on this issue. So I'm hoping to hear from him about any feedback that he has on the current situation and what we might be able to do. Is Director Freeman there?
Finding my mute button, which was I had to get my phone, which was locked, and then unlock it so that I could unmute the phone. So I've attended a number now of the Recreation Park District meetings, and I've also there's meetings that Jonathan has mentioned that are being run by Ginny Maynard, and there are also meetings that are being done by kind of Lead the Valley, and there's a lot of discussion about these sort of topics. I mean, I guess I don't have, and part of the reason why I haven't said anything yet is I don't myself know of a solution that I've realized for things to do here. There's this continual concern that maybe the park district will eventually become sufficiently overloaded that they'll feel the need to do something themselves, and that might involve a need to break up aspects of the encampments. So far, that has not come to pass, and I'm not certain it would. There's been a concern on their end of the destruction of and degradation of park resources and property, which is, I think, a fair concern with the physical construction that's been kind of done. There's a lot of more permanent structures that are being put into place. And when you think about even the concerns of things like slat lines that have damaged trees in the past, like I can at least appreciate the premise of where they're coming from with trying to figure out how to balance the various needs here. I've appreciated their concerns about trying to figure out how to be a social program, but at the same time, I felt that much like with us, these are unprecedented times, and trying to figure out what we can do given the resources and legal constraints that we have, I think is extremely beneficial. But I don't. If you have a more specific question, or you'd like to prompt me on something that you'd like to see kind of get exposed in the record here, I'm happy to talk about it. But I would, barring the county managing to figure out what to do with people, the fact that this is where they live right now, and I don't know. Well, I mean, we need to let them live there, I think. But
yeah, and that's helpful to hear your thoughts and perspective on all of this. That's what I was looking for. And I guess my direct ask for my colleagues is we have this program right now that's operating 2 days a week and going really well. Would we be interested in stepping up to provide some resources to try to expand this program to have coverage on additional days?
Is it possible to put?
I'm gonna go ahead to Director Thurlow.
Ethan, do you have me?
Yeah, you're good.
I'm on the Golden Gate. This is a slippery slope, Ethan. As you know, I mean, you know as well as anybody, because you've operated on this stage. This is a national problem. It's a statewide problem that the smartest people and the most money in the world has not been able to solve. You know, as Bob pointed out, this is beyond our mandate. We were given a mandate by the state legislature. Now we're getting into issues that are social issues, and I'm not even saying they're social justice issues. They're really just social issues. And again, I think we need to stick to what the legislature and the voters have asked us to do. And I do think that we need to have some community forums on this issue. This is what I asked the IV Parks and Recreation District to do at their last board meeting, which is, why are there no public sessions on this? Why are there no town hall meetings? mean, this is one of the most important issues right now, and it looks like the two government agencies are going to go ahead and do policy based on their own ideas and not listen to the public, because I can tell you, I'm starting to get letters from the public. Anyway, thank you.
So the way that I sort of look at this is we've got a program that's existing in our facilities that we are told by staff and by homelessness advocates and coordinated entry staff is both highly successful, is being utilized at a very high rate. And I want to try and replicate that and expand it to meet the need as it exists. And so that's my way of saying I fully agree with Director Bertrand's comments. And I think that for our board, especially, we should think about the fact that this is not a usual time. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and on top of the usual issues that come along with the existence of houselessness and the effect that it has both on them and on our community and on public agencies, we also have somewhat of an obligation, I think, to do what we can to try and think about the public health. And that means doing what we can to keep people where they are, staying put, so that there is not community transmission of this disease amongst this community, which we know already interacts at a pretty high rate, at least for a lot of the locals that are here. So that's where I'm coming from with this. I think this is really something that's a clear decision for us. I'm going to go over to Director Thurlow again.
Yeah, let me just quickly respond. So based on what your first comment was, this is an open-ended investment in social services. I mean, what is the limit here?
That's not what my comment was.
No, your comment was that we need to expand this. All I'm asking is, at what point does the expansion end? Because
well, we're doing 2 days a week right now, and there's only 7 days in the week. So we do have a limited number of days that we could operate. All I'm saying is that I think that given that it's a highly utilized service, we can expand it to be offered on more than just the 2 days a week. So didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to clarify that.
Okay, I'm just saying it's open-ended. Essentially, I mean, the days of the week are not the limit here. The limit is at what point do you say, we've exhausted our, we're gonna buy materials, we're going to provide food, we're gonna hire healthcare workers to come in, we're all these things. I just want to know what's the limit to this, because once you start down this road, you are providing a social service. And by the way, the marketplace will determine that if you have a better product in Isla Vista, people will come to Isla Vista. I mean, that's just a thing of the marketplace. So that was all. That and the idea that we really need to have the community get involved in this. And I'm a little shocked that we seem to be, we meaning the government agency of Isla Vista, seem to be moving down this road in terms of the houseless community with absolutely no public input, when everything we've ever done has involved, in the case of our legislation, years of public input. So I'm just a little surprised that we haven't listened to the public on this one.
Spencer, may I? I'd like to respond.
Go ahead, Director Bertrand.
Thank you. So I appreciate a lot of the concerns that are being raised. But this public outreach one just isn't one of those concerns in my mind. We have been doing this public outreach. Our staff has done extensive announcements to the community about the startup of this program and asking for feedback and collaboration. They've been reaching out to other service providers and other community organizations. We've been speaking with residents about this. The thought that we haven't been communicating about this is just I think that anyone who thinks that is just not paying attention to what we are doing. This has been community based. This whole program came out of our board discussing it at first when we were talking about how we could serve the community during this time. So I definitely understand concerns about just how involved our district can be in this, and concerns about just the gravity of this situation. It's something that is a very large situation that by no means am I proposing we are going to solve. I'm just proposing that we help my neighbors who I'm seeing outside my house every day when I walk around the community, who are in need, who are suffering. And I'm just proposing that we just extend what we're already doing, which right now, the only contribution of our district is a few hours of our staff time. And those hours are going a long way. They're making a big difference. And I'm proposing that we keep stepping up in that way. There's other services of ours that are on hold right now because of COVID-19. I see us having a lot of capacity to continue to expand these services. And I think it's just the right thing to do.
Thank you, Director Bertrand. I want to go over, well, I'll go over to Director Geis first. Was that a hand or are you, Director Geis? I think you're muted.
You know, about 10 years ago when we had the redevelopment agency, we had a significant homeless problem in Isla Vista. The ultimate thing that we did, and they all hung around the community center. We provided meals out of the community center. You know, they had lockers outside the community center. They had trailers outside the community center. And eventually the way we solved that long-term homeless issue in Isla Vista was to build, you know, the facility where we housed 32, you know, homeless people and got them off the street into permanent housing. And Father John was a big part of that. And so, you know, but that was a huge effort and a huge amount of money that came out of the redevelopment agency. And, you know, I was in the frat building when they tore it down, and we, you know, and built that facility. And that's what you need to solve these homeless problems. You know, the next thing that's going to be asked of us is, since the community center is vacant, let's move the homeless into the community center. And, you know, if that's what everybody thinks the right solution is over temporary, we're just going down a road that I don't personally, I'm kind of like George. I don't think it's in our, that problem is not what our district should be trying to solve, because we don't have the money and the resources to solve it. That I see Peggy wants to have a chat, so I'm done.
Yeah. So first, I just want to say, I message Peggy, and I see your comments, and we'll come to you once we have a motion on the table for comment, and reopen public comment. But I just want to say, you know, I think it's apt that you mention Father John right now during this time, who unfortunately can't be here with us. And while we're very thankful that it sounds like preliminarily he was not himself affected with COVID, he is ill during this time, and I wish he was here, because I think he'd provide a valuable perspective to the conversation. What I really just want to say to close my comment on this is that there's, I think, a strong slippery slope argument being made that somehow doing what we can to try and keep people healthy for 2 hours a day, twice a week and trying to increase that to more times a week is gonna make it so that there's somehow multiple homeless people coming in from all over the state, to come to Isla Vista. And I just want to say that I do not think that that assumption is rooted in reality. I think it's rooted in fear. And I'm not willing to succumb to that right now during a global pandemic. I think that this is something that is common sense that we can do for our neighbors, and is something that the people who are on the ground working with our houseless community are asking for and saying would improve the situation. So that's where I'm at on this. I think that at this point, I see Director Freeman with his hand up, and I'm going to go to Director Freeman, and then I just want to say for the board that I think we've come to the point where it would be good to frame our conversation if anyone has a motion to make.
Yes, I will.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
so
Director Freeman.
Yeah, so I first wanted to first defend 2 points that George has made, but then underscore very strongly something that both Spencer and Ethan have said with relation to this. So earlier when I was speaking, I had mentioned the fact that it's complicated as these different governments is we're not really set up as social programs, and yet in these unprecedented times we are. There are things that maybe we need to be changing about our perception of how different situations occur, or how we handle certain situations that have been presented to us. But at the same time, that doesn't give us a free pass, sadly, to change the legal structure or the funding models that we have set up as governments. One of the big complexities that we have as our form of government is that tax money comes into whether it be the park district or the community service district, and it's earmarked for various types of powers that we have. And that even to the extent to which, for example, we were to add a 9th or a 10th power, the money that we have coming in for the first 8 powers that we have wouldn't be allowed to be used to go for like the 9th or the 10th powers, the way that all of this ends up working out. And so to the extent to which these are unprecedented times, that one thing to just remember is that doesn't kind of give us a free pass to change how we operate within the legal structure, except to the extent to which we've been given kind of executive orders from the government, which has happened, right? There's certain things in, for example, even our ability to have this virtual meeting, where there's been an executive order that's overridden various of the legal constraints. Like if we were just to say this is an unprecedented time for health reasons, we're going to have this virtual meeting, somebody could sue us over it, unless it were the case that we had gotten that order from the government. And so I think that when we're dealing with these situations, there is like I just want to defend and kind of like provide some context on the things that George is saying. Like I think that they're very, very true, that there's limits on what we can really do to approach the issues that we're dealing with. Now, I also will say I will defend, like another defense for something that George said is that when we talk about like providing public input to things, I think we usually talk about it in terms of providing that input before we embark on a program, as opposed to just telling them about the program that we've done. Now, the thing that I'm going to underscore, though, from what Ethan and Spencer said, is that I almost feel like this is almost like just kind of like a miscommunication in the setup of what we're talking about here. Is that, so my understanding of the program that's involved here is that we're not really doing that much. We're essentially opening the doors of the community center in order to allow for United Way to use the space. And then we have Jonathan, who is a staff time that we've kind of committed to, that we're kind of honestly maybe underutilizing a little bit right now, because normally there'd be all sorts of in-person things and all sorts of other things, and the university is shut down so much. And so we kind of have some spare capacity also in our staffing that we can utilize in order to pull this sort of stuff off. And so when I look at the program, maybe it makes it sound like we're spending, thousands of dollars on food and thousands of dollars on like stuff in order to be able to pull this off. But really what we're talking about here is just something that we kind of like hung the CSD shingle over as part of the resource that we have at the community center in order to allow for that usage. And I feel like almost maybe if it weren't so CSD branded, if it were instead, really this is a United Way program that is using our community center, and that we are providing some community center related staff assistance to, I think it starts to feel a lot more like what is in our wheelhouse and what is related to our community facilities power and how we approach a lot of these problems. And because of that, I mean, I'd be supportive of quote, expanding this program, because I don't really think it's expanding a program. I feel like it's more just expanding the hours that we provide, the resources that we have available, the underutilized community center that people aren't using right now because we don't have, but not underutilized, not like using it for a fundamentally different purpose, using it for the same kind of purpose that we normally would have been using it for, just maybe like more hours than we might have used it for otherwise. So those are my thought processes on that. Why, like, I agree with George's concerns. I want to back up George's concerns. And yet I feel like it's just due to a miscommunication and how this was framed as a CSD program. I think that they might not apply as strongly here.
Thank you, Director Freeman. I'll go over to Director Bertrand.
Yes, and thank you all for your comments. I think this has been a good discussion. I just want to make it clear what we are trying to do and what we're not trying to do. We are not, as a district, trying to house people right now. We are not, as a district, trying to directly provide healthcare to people. We are not, as a district, trying to provide direct behavioral wellness support to folks. There are professionals that do that, and we honor their work and thank them for their work. What we are trying to do is something quite simple, what we're currently doing, opening our facilities for a couple hours a week to provide some basic services, or rather provide the professionals who provide the service with the space and the support. And I propose that we keep doing that and do more of that. So that's why I'm going to move to direct staff to pursue an expansion of homeless support services with United Way and or other community organizations during COVID-19, and to report back to the board with a proposal to address any additional resource needs.
I will second that motion.
Ethan, could you repeat that one, please, just one more time?
Yeah, I actually I typed it up, so I'm going to put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Bertrand. That's a motion made by Bertrand and seconded by Freeman. Now that we have a motion, I want to go over back to open public comment and go over to someone who's been patiently waiting, Peggy. So go ahead when you're ready.
Yeah, I just unmuted. I think neither of our organizations are set up to do this, okay? This is not our charter. This is not what we're supposed to be doing. I think the best thing that we can do together is to find the appropriate organizations to come in and help. And that's medical, that's social services, that's housing, that's a bunch of stuff. If we're using the community center to, as a place for those organizations to come in to help, I understand that. But we have to be really careful right now, you guys. We have had an increase in the parks. And I appreciate what George said, in that the better it looks here, the more likely we are to get more. And I've been here pretty much longer than most of you, and I've seen a lot. And I was so appreciative of Pescadero Lofts, because it took so many people that had been here for so long in Isla Vista and gave them a safe place. And George, Bob was right. That made a huge difference, putting that in. But what's happening now I don't know where these folks are coming from. And we at the parks do not have the staffing and the ability to be taking care of this. So whatever you folks do, you really need to keep in mind that we're overwhelmed. And I don't want a situation that draws more people from other areas. I want to take care of the people that have been here for years, and I know them, and they're out there, and they're having problems with the new people coming in. So this is a complicated situation, you guys, and we have to be really careful about what we're providing and how we provide it, and the process behind it. And we need professionals out here, okay? And for using the community center for that, I get it. But if we're just gonna be, I'm not gonna say it. I don't want to be that person. But we just have to be careful, okay? And our groups need to work together. And George, I hear you talking about forums and town halls. And trust me, I'm hearing a lot from a lot of different people, and we've been talking about this in meetings, and I'm all for opening it up more. Maybe what we do is a group Zoom meeting between our agencies and ask more of the public to come participate. But at this point, there's dangerous situations out there right now, both through violence and through drugs and through sanitation and through the possibility of people so sick from different reasons that something could happen to them. And these little encampments are hidden. And what I just want to figure out a way for somebody to go check on people and make sure they're okay and see if we can't get them in better situations. But I've been here before when it has increased to a point where it is so incredibly dangerous for not just the people that are living in the parks, but for the people surrounding our residents, our students, our long-term families. This is a big deal. And I don't mean to come from a place of fear, Spencer, but I'm, I have a certain amount of fear, but I also have a certain amount of faith in all of you who were there to help come up with some solutions and to help bring in the professionals that can find the best way to help folks and also to keep the community safe for everyone else who lives here. So if you have questions, I'm always here, you guys. You all have my phone number. Please call.
Thank you, Peggy. I appreciate your comments on this, and appreciate the outreach that you've been doing. I know we've spoken on a couple of occasions over this past week, just about houselessness and the community in general. And I appreciate the difficult situation that you and the Park District are in during this pandemic, and want to do what we can to partner and help. So thanks for your comments. Okay, with that, are there any additional comments from our board on this motion?
Yes, lastly, I'll just thank Jonathan. He's really been a leader in this area. He's working every day in communication with folks at the county, folks in law enforcement, folks at the Park District, and local service providers to really communicate about what the needs are here in Isla Vista, separate from what we're able to provide as a district. So thank you, Jonathan, just for all of the insight that you're providing in those efforts.
Thank you for that, Ethan, and I would echo that. Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, I've got a hand from Bob. I'm going to go over to Director Geis.
I really like Peggy's comments, and it just makes me sitting back off the camera and saying, well, this really, when you think about the function of government, this is a county problem, and this is a state problem, as somebody has already said, and then it's a federal government problem. And I don't mind us as a smaller organization doing our part, but I don't think we should put the burden on our staff to solve this problem. I don't think this is where Jonathan should be, putting his time. And I would disagree with whoever said, I forget, that, now that there's a pandemic, Jonathan doesn't have a lot to do. Jonathan has a ton of stuff to do. And he worked on it all week about the buildings and stuff, which are a huge problem. So I just don't know why that I agree with Peggy, and collectively we should be trying to work on this, but for some reason, I don't know what the count is in the parks, but maybe we should be doing our own, our own counts and figure out why is this thing exploding in Isla Vista. And, I've seen in the city of Santa Barbara where they've also tried to provide these great services to homeless down off Milpas. And they eventually created themselves such a big problem that they eventually had to shut down those services. So it's very difficult, but I would just say we should be really careful.
Thank you for that comment, Bob. Are there any other comments from members of the board? I see a hand from Jay.
Yeah, so that was my comment, Bob, and soon after I said it, I realized, I mean, it's kind of a weird thing to have said, but I am curious of just how much time, like maybe we could ask staff, like, you know, Jonathan, how much time are you spending on this program that's being run currently?
On the program specifically, plus, you know, the different homelessness conversations that happen throughout the week, I would say, you know, 5 to 10 hours a week.
How about just on this program specifically then?
Well, on this program last week, I spent maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours because I went and opened up and helped them set up and, you know, closed up and, you know, had conversations with people there. And, you know, the conversations I have with Emily Allen outside of setting them up just to, you know, talk about evaluation, what to do next. So, you know, for this specifically, it was like, you know, like 2 hours last week, maybe a couple hours the week before, more than that, setting it up, creating it. We didn't really create much. We moved something that we did to another location and rebranded it.
So in comparison to some other kind of operation that might be happening in the community center, such as, for example, the thing that wasn't IV First Fridays, the Jeffrey's Jazz Club, like for example, the Jeffrey's Jazz Club. I mean, is this like a much larger use of commitment of time for something that's happening in the community center, or a much lower commitment of time?
Yeah, well, you know, we did have community center staff back then, and we don't now. So that's a difference right now. And I'm also, you know, how do I say this? Back during when we had Jeffrey's Jazz House, our community center staff really thought it was important to be there directly in the room the entire time the event was happening. And I'm not taking that approach. So I'll go at 12, help them set up, stay till 1, and then I'll go to the office for like an hour and a half, and then come back. So that's kind of how I spend my time those Wednesdays and Fridays. Help set up, go wait in the office, come and help close down.
Yeah, so again, to provide context for everyone, the reason why I'm kind of asking these sets of questions here is just to like look at the idea of, is this something where we are allocating staff time towards providing social services, or is it we are allocating staff time towards providing a community center for other people to provide social services? And based upon these answers, it's really sounding to me like the latter, that this is more in line with the amount of time investment that would be used by somebody who's simply providing access to one of our facilities. And that whether the question now is saying that we just don't want to provide access to our facilities to groups like United Way seems like a very different thought process to me to be entering this conversation than the idea of like, oh, we don't want to be expanding a social services program, but I don't think we're currently operating. But.
Thank you for your comments, Jay. Are there any other comments from members of the board? Okay, I'm going to go back to Bob one more time, and then I'm going to bring it back.
I really like Jay's comments about, you know, structured this like it's United Way. But what I'm more concerned about is we're bringing this population into our facility, and I'm not sure what kind of, you know, PPE Jonathan's wearing over there, because they are groups that aren't practicing social distancing, and they're very vulnerable to get this disease and explode it amongst our facility. And that's, you know, we're just exposing we're exposing our staff to a vulnerable population that could have the disease. And you know, I was over at the building the other day, and I witnessed it myself, because they're all congregating, almost were congregating, you know, less than 3 feet from where I parked my car. And so, you know, I just think we're going down a path that we don't have the experience to deal with. We don't have the training in healthcare services. Jonathan doesn't have that training. I don't have that training. So I just think it's interesting, but I'll just be quiet from now on.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate your comments. Jonathan, can you confirm though, because I know when I was with you the other day, you had a mask and some PPEs. You got equipment when you're out there, out and about.
I have my own like cloth mask that someone made for me, but on Friday we didn't have anything on Wednesday of last week, but on Friday Emily brought the face masks, like the plastic screen in front of your face kind of thing for me and the AmeriCorps members to wear. So I didn't end up needing to use mine on Friday, but she has one for me.
But did they disinfect the facility after the meetings?
Yes, I did forget to mention that. It's one of the, there's so many details, and this is one of the few minutes we worked on this to get this set up is Deborah got Big Green to disinfect the building on, I think, Wednesday nights and Friday nights, or Thursday and Saturdays, like the day before they're used. Now, so that's an additional cost. It's not a huge cost. I think we haven't gotten the bill yet, but when we had the community room cleaned the same way, it was less than $100. So we'll see, but the community center is much bigger. So but the Big Green Cleaning Company is coming in to disinfect the facility after each use.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Jonathan. Okay, so I'm going to bring it back since I think we've had a hearty discussion on this, and it's been really good to hear everyone's perspectives. I know this isn't a easy to solve problem or clear to solve problem, but I'm confident that with the motion that we've got here on the table, in order to direct staff to pursue an expansion with the United Way and other community organizations during COVID-19, and then report back to the board with a proposal, I think that we're in a good place. So with that, if there's no other questions of the board, I think I'm going to call the question and have Jonathan call the roll.
Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Thurlow?
Yes.
Director Geis? Director Geis? My internet's unstable. I'm not sure if you're hearing me or not. No, you're voting no. Okay. And Director Bertrand?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes 4 yeses, 1 no, and 2 absences. Thanks everyone for this conversation. Let's continue the conversation, and I'm excited to hear the report back soon.
I'll mention that if I bring this up to United Way, talk to Emily tomorrow probably, some expansions might be able to happen, without any of our investment or resources. So maybe if they say, okay, we can open Thursdays now, that could be something that happens before I come back to the board. I'll bring back more substantial changes. Like we need to spend $5,000 on X. Just making it up.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, okay. And Spencer, if I may, I just want to say, I know not all of us see this issue and how we approach it the same way, but I genuinely appreciate everyone's point of view and respect where everyone's coming from, and we're all learning as we go. So thank you, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Let's keep working together, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you, Peggy.
See you.
Okay. With that, we're going to move back up on the agenda to item 4.2, the Isla Vista Community Center Grant. I'll hand it over to Jonathan.
Great. So I can't remember when it was, but the board did direct me to work on the next version of the community center grant with Isla Vista Youth Projects, and a lot has happened since that month that you took that vote. And one of the things that happened was our community center staff did resign their positions, different unrelated reasons, not unrelated to the grant or anything like that. But that did happen, and so it did change the conversation a bit. And then we did get more notice and information on the direction of where the management and ownership and operations of these buildings is going. And so, with all these things kind of in the mix, and in what our headspace is, and we also had our budget process going, and our finance committee met last week and discussed kind of the 2 options and 2 directions we can go in funding this grant and the operation of the community center. And there was a pretty strong preference for one of them, and that is to do something where we hire the staff directly. They will be our employees, and we will, make all the costs and expenses related to the community center directly ourselves, like advertising or paying the organizations that put on programs like the Zumba, for example. And then what IVYP's role, though, has been, since the beginning, they've been brought in and part of this because of their expertise in outreach and relationship with the youth and family part of our community. And so I've discussed with Lori is, I know one of our ideas was, can we just give them some grant money and they can put on programs that meet youth and families? And just doing that without funding like their own staff was not really feasible for them. But what they're able to do is, if we had a small fund on a like hourly basis, not on a always, we're going to give them this whole lump sum, they would help consult with us and work with us in the areas where we need work. So if we did need youth and family help for one event we're doing, then they would work with us on that, and we'd pay them for that kind of consulting, is what they kind of offered to me as something they can do if we were to go the route of us hiring the staff directly. And so I think that works. We can work out the details of that, and I think we need to still define what the price is and what exactly they do for us in that case. But I think it does work in my head. Like, I can see how that is in a continuation of their current role while also removing some of their current role, but it keeps, it kind of preserves the main reason we went with IV Youth Projects in the first place. Well, I think there were two main reasons. One was our capacity to actually hire and manage staff like that, and the other one was their like expertise and unique touch points in the youth and family community. So we could still preserve that. And then also, I didn't mention this yet, but there would be a pretty significant cost savings if we did it this way, even if we included some funding that would go to youth projects for them helping us execute some of our youth and family programming. It's, if you just kept the grant this year the same, and this is not thinking about how it would be different next year, but if you just kept this year's grant the same, I think the savings was like $10,000 to 20, like I think it was like $15,000. Sorry, I misspoke. It was like $15,000 savings. And so a lot of that can go to program, and this, some of it can go to the support for the youth projects. So that's what I recommend doing. It's also kind of covered in the budget too, but it's something I'll need to, work out now more specifically with Lori. But she did ask me to pitch both options. I mean, she did say that they would like to continue hiring the staff and having them part of their organizations, but then I would manage them directly as their like direct supervisor as like a option 2, and that's what our finance committee discussed. And I think it was just it just seemed more financially feasible with meeting the same kind of outcome of us hiring them and having youth projects as backup support rather than putting it all on youth projects and us being in a more support role, I guess, if we want to think of it that way.
Thank you for that report, Jonathan. The first thing I want to ask is on that idea of doing something where Jonathan managed IVYP staff, because that just seems like a little bit of a, I guess, unusual type of arrangement. And I want to get Ross's input on that, and if that exposes us in any way to potential weird liability, human resources related conflicts.
I don't know if Ross is able to talk. He did text me that he would text me if he wanted to talk.
Oh, okay.
So Ross, are you there? Or I couldn't tell from the text he sent me.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I guess it's not even a question that I really need an immediate answer on, because I will say that I think that after discussing it with the budget committee, what we were most interested in seeing was a version of this program where everything regarding the staff was done in-house, And we had hoped to see some sort of an arrangement where IVYP would still provide the programming, but what you're proposing seems like it could be the best of both worlds when it comes to still being able to rely on their advice and their expertise in reaching these populations of our community that are underserved, but also still being able to provide them that programming as well.
Yeah, and Ross is available to speak. I can unmute him now. And I just wanted to respond really quick. I mean, I think it's like a fair thing for them to say no to. For so maybe we wouldn't be so happy if an organization said, here's this chunk of money, do stuff with it, but we're not gonna give you people power to be able to do it. Like, you're gonna keep your current staff structure. And that's what they were uncomfortable with, is they don't have that extra capacity if they weren't like getting kind of paid to do it. So that's why kind of Lori came up with this other option of we can support your staff. So like if our staff needs to do a youth and family program, they would work with IVYP to get it done. They wouldn't be fully responsible for it because they've got their own jobs and duties going on.
It's a great point.
Ross, you're unmuted now.
Yeah, if the board wants to look into what it would take to hire people on for as employees, it would be similar to the process that the board engaged in order to bring on a general manager and an assistant general manager. Ultimately, the scope of the duties are what will define the potential scope of liability and the attendant risk mitigation that we would need to look at. I mean, as a general concept, no, you have the ability to hire additional employees to fulfill different functions. And in at least in some instances, it makes a little bit more sense on the legal side of things, because part of the difficulty we were navigating with IVYP kind of running the community center was, how do we correctly attribute risk to the different participants in the relationship. And it placed a lot of a burden, a lot of stress on IVYP and what they were trying to carry out, what the district was trying to carry out to fund this program and to provide these services. The current arrangement that Jonathan's been discussing with the board, it kind of dumps some of that stress and on those structures, and really gets back to using IVYP as what they're good at, which is providing this information and potentially giving instruction to the employees and the resources that the district would be developing internally through its own staff, basically taking hints from some of the experts in the field. So no real peculiar legal issues as a general principle, but obviously, the details of how those employees would be used in programming, the community center would dictate what we would do to make sure that they have all of the responsibilities and rights and everything that they do as public employees, and also mitigating risk for, another facet of public-facing interface and programming from the district with the public.
Thanks for that, Ross. I think that Ross touched on what I was getting at and was able to put into words, which is that in order to keep the relationship between our two organizations as clear as possible, it'll be good to have these things delineated out. And so I'm definitely supportive of the model where we bring things in-house when it comes to our community center staff, and we keep the programming in-house as well, with the professional guidance of IVYP and their consultation in some sort of that's where their role is clearly defined. Are there other board members that have comments on this item?
I guess I'm kind of missing the conversation a little bit. So we're suggesting something different than I've heard before. If we kept Ivy youth projects around, I thought, what we were interested in is just to have them make sure we gave them money to deliver their programs in the community center. I think we need to take over the management of the community center and put Jonathan and Deborah in there to hire the good person to go run the programs and manage that center. And I think that it should be, whoever we have as employees, their boss should be clear that it's Jonathan.
Yeah, Bob, no, I think you're spot on. I think the confusing piece that came up was what Ivy Youth Project's role is, and they said that they don't want to kind of like take our money and put on programs, but if we had the money, same money as before for the programs that have been ongoing or maybe new ones, they would help us, but they wouldn't want it in the situation where we give it to them and go do the event.
Cool. Okay, cool.
One of our Ivy's community center staff would help, spearhead it with their assistance, and that's the deal I kind of worked out with Lily.
Sorry, I was kind of sleeping.
Can I?
Doing something else when you explained that before. Sorry.
Can I?
Sure. Yeah, George, I see you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on Bob's comment. I really don't think we need to hire a consultant to tell us what kind of programs to put on. I really like his idea, which I thought was the original idea, which is we pay them for specific programming. But I mean, paying them to be a consultant on programming, oh my God. All right, now I'll shut up.
They said no. I'm telling you, they said no to that. And that's what they gave back in return as something that they can do.
So then we don't need them. Sorry. We don't need to pay them as a consultant. We need to put on programs. We need to put all that, every single dime we have into putting programs on in that center for families and kids and poor people and rich people. Sorry. It's getting late.
Okay. Thank you for that, George. So the way that I see it, I'm just going to talk from a numbers perspective, and people on the budget committee will be familiar with this, is that we've been talking about the roles of Ivy, or we've been talking about these two $25,000 numbers that we have. And one of the $25,000 numbers is the money that we had allocated for programming. And so the way that I understand it, the way that you're recommending it, Jonathan, normally when we would allocate $25,000 for programming, the lion's share of that money would be spent on programming, and some of that money would be spent on the people who are providing the programming so that they can do it. And now what you are proposing is that instead of $25,000, there is, let's say, a number, let's say something in the ballpark of like $20,000 that's for the programming, and then $5,000 that's for the staff consulting, which is what IVYP is more comfortable with. Is that, without getting into the specifics of the numbers, is the principle correct?
Yeah, that's kind of what she described to me as what they can do, and obviously I can like firm it up more. But yes, it would be them supporting our staff in getting those programs either put out into the community or making people aware of them, or anything like that. That's kind of what she said. That's what they can do, is help us get our programs out there.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Do other board members have comments on this item? I'm gonna go back to George.
Real quick, Jonathan, that's exactly what their donors give them money to do. It's exactly what their mission is. And the idea that we would pay them an extra $5, $10, $15, or $20,000 to do what essentially they're telling the community that they already do seems strange to me. So I'm not in favor. I mean, again, I'll go back to what this is Bob's idea. Let's give them all the money we can for programs.
Yeah, I can go back to Lori and tell her that this is the sentiment, if that is. I mean, again, like we talked about this twice, and I think the main takeaway is that we're going to go in the direction of us hiring the staff, and then we can figure out maybe what IVYP's role is. But because what she had proposed to me was, the other idea she had asked me, and I think this is what Spencer had asked Ross, what the legalities of that would be, is she asked me if we would be in favor of Isla Vista Youth Projects hiring and being the employer, again, still for these staff members, and then me being the supervisor. And that's where I said, no, I think I would, and our finance committee also said, we would prefer the route of us hiring the staff and then finding a role that IVYP can play. And so we can keep figuring that out.
Okay, great.
Yes, and Ethan here, I'll just clarify like one example of what I could see us partnering with them in providing services would be like, say if IVYP wanted to host their Mother's Day event free for youth and families in Isla Vista. Like maybe that's something that we would sponsor and provide them funding to carry out. Or if they wanted to provide a Haunt the Loop event or something else where they're the person providing the service or activity, like I definitely see that as something that we could help with. But I would agree that we probably are not in the position to pay for consulting right now. But any sort of direct service that they want to provide, I would certainly be interested in seeing how we could fit that into our program.
Yeah, let me just say one thing on that Mother's Day event. I think it's a good example because I think that this is the example that was used when Lori and I talked. And if I'm speaking wrong, I'll take my own fault. But because usually what would happen for that Mother's Day event, it's been the staff member that is hired with our grant money who organizes that event. And last year, for example, Paulina did it last May, and she worked with Anamaya to, have her guidance on setting it up and getting it done. And so in this case, if we have the staff hired under us, like Paulina's role, whatever it turns into under us, and that person, the Mother's Day event kind of it would not happen as far as I know under IVYP unless they had that staff member replaced with them. And so under this case, what was proposed to us was that we would hire that staff member, or that's what we want to do. We would hire that staff member and they would put on the Mother's Day event, and then when they go to IVYP for help, that's when we would pay the proposed consultation fee, just to make the proposal clear.
Yeah, and what I'm saying more is like, say if we were approached by them and they want to do this event in IV, we could say, hey, we can help. But I don't see us necessarily going to contract for planning or consultation services. But just like, say if they say, hey, we want to put on a family game night in Isla Vista a couple times a month for the families to come out. Can you help us do this? Like, that's the type of stuff that I would like to help with. And not just with IVYP, but other organizations too. That was kind of where I was seeing us collaborating.
Yeah. So I want to focus the discussion. So I think we have consensus that our community center management staff should be housed in-house under the CSD. I think it'll provide more clarity for all of our staff, and it will also end up saving us money in the long run. And I think that's the big issue that Jonathan's coming to us seeking guidance on. So I would encourage if the board wants to put that into a motion, that's the direction that we would like to go. And in regards to this other element regarding programming and potential consultation, let's try to go back to the drawing board on that and not make a decision here tonight on that. We've got the entirety of the budget process to make a decision on something like that. And I think that what's really important right now is that we have clarity for what the big chunk of the cost is going to be, which is the management staff of the center. So I don't know if anyone has a motion to that effect, but I'd be willing to entertain it. Okay, if no one has a motion, we can keep talking.
No, come on, Bob, make the motion.
I'm getting a little tired.
Yeah.
And I got a little
make
bit
this
mixed
motion,
up
and
on.
don't worry, I'm going to get rid of the next two items.
Hold on one second.
Move to direct. All right, I'll motion. We move to direct staff to enter into negotiations with the IVYP to determine the best management of the community center and our collaboration on programming. Does that work, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay, I heard a second from Freeman. Motion made by Thurlow. Can maybe be amenable to the maker and the seconder if we explicitly stated that we would have community center management staff in-house?
I love it.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, we've got success on that. Jonathan, you think you can read the motion back to us once you've got it?
Not rewritten it with this new page. I'm not really sure how that put into this. I guess determine the best management to negotiate with IVYP on collaboration with community center programming. Okay, and begin the process to hire staff internally.
Yeah,
for the community.
That's good.
Okay, with that, is there any public comment on this motion? Okay, any further board discussion?
Yeah, the only thing I'll think about that motion is once we go through the budget and once we, start talking about all the costs related to the, our costs related to running that community center, then this discussion might turn a little bit, because what we're really offering to places like Ivy Youth Projects is we want them to come use our building. And I would assume we're probably not going to charge fees other than cleaning costs. And that's the thing that we're bringing to the table when people run their programs in our facility. It's not that we're going to pay them money to come do their program in our facility for free. I don't think that's what the motion says. I can't see it on the screen.
No, that's not what the motion says. Jonathan, can you scroll over down to it?
Here it is.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay. So with that, if there's no other board comment, I'm going to call the question. Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Yeah, Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Thurlow?
Yes.
Director Geis?
Yes.
Director Bertrand?
Yes.
All right. Motion passes unanimously. 5 yeses, 2 absences. Thanks, everyone. Okay, we are going to move on to item 4.6, the preliminary budget. I want to just start off by saying a big thank you to our budget committee, which includes Director Geis, Director Bertrand, and myself. We have had some great conversations so far, and I really just want to say at the outset of this, as many government organizations right now are experiencing a lot of nerves about what this COVID-19 related recession is going to mean for them. And I think that we are very fortunate to be in a place where we are not one of those agencies. Jonathan's going to give a fuller presentation that dives into that. But I just want to say from the outset that I think I'm really thankful for where we're at. So go ahead and take it away, Jonathan.
Cool. Thank you. Everyone's had a chance to review this. So the way I'm going to go about this is first talk about revenue and then talk about expenses. And so I wanted to review so I've reviewed the estimated actuals with the finance committee a lot, but I haven't had a chance much with the board. But I'll keep it to a higher level since I know that's what's maybe more preferred sometimes, especially later at night. So
Jonathan,
yeah.
can I interrupt just for a sec?
Yeah.
It's not clear to me what we're going to do tonight, and so what's the outcome of this agenda item?
Well, this is the first time the board as a whole is seeing the preliminary budget for next year, and the finance committee has recommended this preliminary budget. It's not done yet, obviously, but it gives you the general structure, which is pretty different from this year's budget for next year. And then we want input. We want to see is this did we hit the mark on this? Did we do something totally wrong that we need to cut, changed? It's this is the rough draft of the budget, and now we have another month or more after tonight to work on it and then give you a final budget that is less painful to discuss and pass in June because we've edited it enough.
So let me ask this again, just like the closed session, this budget is the most important thing we're going to do in the next 3 months and the past 3 months. And does it make sense to bring it on to the agenda at 9:30? And given its importance, or would I be out of line to say, let's schedule a special meeting where we just, open meeting and at a time when the public can come and we widely advertise it and we talk about this budget at 5:30 as opposed to 9:30. Now, I apologize because myself and the old guys are starting to fade, and this is really, really important. I've looked at these numbers. I'm incredibly impressed with what the finance committee and you have put together, but oh my God, we would never schedule a budget meeting at 9:30 at night. So, am I being a wussy?
George, thanks for your input. I understand it's a tough time, and these Zoom meetings tend to go longer, I think, and I think it's something we all struggle with dealing with. I will say, I think the preliminary budget, this is something that's talked about in the budget process law. I don't think it's something we can really get around, and unfortunately, we did have a number of other important high-profile items that had public commenters beforehand, so we had to sort of go in that order.
In terms of public process, one thing that's in our budget process that's in the works being planned, I think we're going to announce the time and date pretty soon for the second week of May. Originally the first week of May, but we had to move it, is doing like a budget town hall, which we've done every year.
I think that's great.
That's a different kind of format, and I think last year you didn't let it, and it was a great. People really, a lot of people came. I think almost 100 people came. And so this is more of a procedural thing for the board to become more aware of our finances. And then
go for it. I've already slowed it down. I will tell everybody, I'll give everybody a heads up. I'm going to move that we don't have a closed session based on our previous board discussion about the condition of our buildings. So I hope that maybe opens up a little bit of time for you, Jonathan, to walk us through this.
Well, I don't think I should take too long to do this anyway.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Let's move forward with the budget presentation.
Okay. Great. So the first thing is revenue. And as you can see, we budgeted for this year to have 1.1 million in revenue, most of it from our utility tax at 850,000. And while there will be some sort of slowdown for the rest of the year because of COVID-19, this spreadsheet kind of shows you the revenue projections and why they are what they are. You can see our estimated actual is 933,000, which is 82,000 above what we budgeted. And that is with a pretty conservative end of the year budgeting. So if you can see here in the green is our actuals for this fiscal year. And so March, what I've highlighted here, what's listed as revenue for March is revenue we received on April 20th this year, which part of the month, half of it, was affected by spring break, people having left town for COVID-19. So we haven't gotten a full month yet of the full effect. But as you can see, the white are the budgeted numbers, and they are already much lower than the actuals. So a downturn, we've already budgeted in a downturn, mostly because we were using very old numbers when we made the 1920 budget, since we didn't have reliable numbers at this time of the year last year to have our budget. So for example, you can see we're still using 6,000 as the revenue for April from the electricity tax. We've never gone below 20 except twice for this tax in this fiscal year. And so we'll see where our budget ends up. It might be a little lower than 933,000, but based on what we've only collected so far, like what's actually in our bank, we've collected 717,000. So we're already almost all the way there for our budgeted revenue for this year. And that's why when we made our budget projections for next year, we used only actuals where we had them. And then we continued using the conservative numbers, which are, again, conveniently this period where we're most affected by COVID-19 changes in the community. So we're still using the lower numbers. And this kind of explains how each number was created. So, electricity is the old numbers from back we got in 2018 before Measure R even passed. And these are averages of past years. And then we get to the 936,000 number for our revenue for next year. And that, this is why it's a preliminary budget too. If May 20th comes around and the revenue completely plummets to nothing, that's just a whole other, we'll incorporate that and we'll discuss, but we've already been pretty conservative with the revenue. And so that's why our finance committee felt confident putting this as the proposed revenue for the utility user tax for next year. Does that make sense? Any questions? I know this is like the main question for revenue compared to the other ones. Okay, cool. The next point in revenue is rent. This will be a new source of revenue depending on how the negotiations with the county go on the community center. But what we have been told is that the rent right now that's generated by the community resource building is 164,000, and that's already minus what we pay. We pay 14,000 in rent, so that's what our revenue in rent will be. I just put in a flat 200,000, which is our contribution from IVCSD. It's been less a little bit in the past, but we just put in 200 for now. The 38,900, this is revenue from the Compost Collective Program grant that we got already. This is a net zero because we're going to spend exactly that on that program next year. And then finally, this is just the continuing spending down of our UCSB funding. We would have ended up doing it for like the internship this year, but we ended up getting also a lot of money from the census grant to pay for the internship, since a lot of other interns have been working with the census. So we'll get to do that next year. We need to wipe out this old fund balance. And so with all those different sources of revenue, it gives us a total revenue of $1.395 million next year. So pretty much $1.4 million budget going into the 2020-2021 year, which is, again, pretty significantly different than even this year by quite a bit.
Hey, Jonathan. Yeah, Jonathan, George.
Mm-hmm.
I really think, based on our conversations earlier, we should take out the $164,000 in rent.
This one, yeah. I mean, I think, well, yeah, that's a fair point, and we'll see how the negotiations.
Well, I
forward.
know,
Yeah.
but I would just say as we go forward, we should really take that out. I mean, we all know after we just heard that report that there's no way we're going to collect $164,000 in rent and give them $2 million in tenant improvements. So I mean, I'm just saying that's the reality of it. We're going to go down a long and difficult road to negotiate this. But I think that in terms of these dollar amounts, we should take that out right now. What do you, I mean, I'd ask my colleague Bob Geis what he thinks.
So I want to keep this conversation from getting too far off
All right.
track.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
All right. It's a fair point. That's the first time that we saw those numbers, and we're going to continue to consider it.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
We saw the same report that you did. So.
Okay. Sorry.
It's okay, George. Okay. Jonathan, can you go ahead and continue with your report?
Yeah. So moving on to the spending, and so I'm going to be a little more general on the operations end, since this one is pretty much not changed since last year. But with the one major change in the operations program is the fact that we moved part of Deborah's salary that was under the mediation program. That was it was an interesting thing to try to budget it that way, but I think it's just simpler and cleaner to just put her entire salary into ops staff. So no change in the spending besides the potential raise that's going to be on the agenda next meeting. But this is the same spending. It looks like it's more because it was moved from another program. But otherwise, I don't know if I need to review this because this is almost exactly the same, with some costs are lowered that don't need to be there as much anymore, and some are raised that are gonna be needed, like training. If we have more new staff, we need more training. For example, ADP payroll fees kind of came in a little more than we expected, but pretty much this program is our base operations and is pretty much gonna look like this for a while at this point. I don't see this changing too much. The next thing is community programs, and this is obviously the biggest area of spending that we have now. It's about 30% of our budget. Part of the, I'm going to go into each sub-program here, and they're all pretty different. The community center one is the biggest at $300,000. This is the cost of the staff, and it ends up being $151,000 for the staff cost compared to in the grant with IVYP this year, it was closer to $164,000. So that's where the big savings there came. And so this is having the two staff members that we had with them at the same salary level, and with our cost structure for staff. So that's what it's going to be, $151,000. $5,000 for marketing for the community center. Again, that's carried over from the grant of what was in there. And then some more specific numbers. So our programming fund is $25,000, which is pretty much the same as what we had this year, but with the added amount of the savings. If we were to enter into a lease for both buildings, then we would be required to have property insurance under that lease as the current state of it. And so that would be, according to Golden State Risk Management, $5,600. There's some soft numbers in here that we still don't know the exact figures for, and you'll even see I shared these costs are evolving, but for now we put building maintenance at $40,000 and utilities at $40,000. These are going to change. These are placeholders. They have some basis in reality, but I want everyone to know that these are just inflated placeholders, hopefully inflated, and then they can come down a bit. And then furnitures and fixtures, for just operating the new building, we put in $6,700 this year, but this is giving us room to see what else we need. The new addition here is grant writing, and this is something our finance committee brought up as an interest to have within this program. Is not having a hired grant writer ourselves, since that would be, that'd be much more money. But if we could, on a consultation basis or an independent contractor basis, bring someone on to do, specific grants that we need help on to get done, because none of us really have that specific training, and it is a very built up skill to write good grants that are successful from federal government. So we put in 25,000 for grant writing. So that's the community center. It's going to cost us $300,000, rough, give or take. The next program under 3,000 is special projects, and this is just that general fund for community initiated ideas and programs. We don't have a defined way to use this yet, and we don't have, it's not going to be maybe for sure 30,000. We kind of just put that in there, but that's what behind that is. 3,000 Survivor Resource Center, just carry forward, or not carry forward, but keeping the same budget for it. Again, sorry, we have a new participant. Next is new program development. We put in $0 for that right now, since there's a lot of new programs anyways getting their own budgets this next year. And our budget's kind of extended that way with a lot of new programs already. Next up is the community garden, and one of the things we heard at the last in-person board meeting was to just get them a slot within the budget instead of doing the grant system. And so here we go. We've got 12,000 for that service, which has been, I think, very successful and kind of connects to the next, which is the compost collective. And this one again is, I haven't fully finished creating like the full-on proposal for moving forward, and that's going to be next meeting, but this is just pretty much what cost would be generally if we used up all the money on labor and taxes and all that. And then the last item under 3,000 is the community festival, which I kept at 55,000. That's how much we had been talking about paying this year. The full cost of this is like 80,000. And I didn't include revenue from UCSB for this, or the expenses from what they were going to pay for with their revenue. We can, I think it would be just cleaner for us to just put in what we expect to contribute, and then we'll talk about how this evolves later in the year. Any questions on this program? This is a big one. This is where most of our money goes right now. Okay. Next up is rental housing mediation. So the budget for this one stayed pretty much the same, but technically I would say it went up a bit, because one of the ideas we have discussed, and again, this is just for the preliminary budget, we need to talk about this separately and it'll fold back into the budget later in May. But the idea is to keep most of the program the same, the mediator services and the advertising, but then we would hire like an intern type coordinator whose main focus would be promotion of the program and letting people know about it, while Deborah would maintain the role of being the scheduler and person that clients talk to before they get to the mediator. So this one we need to workshop again still, but I just put something in the budget so that it can be represented of something we're going to do differently here. Next up is public safety. It's safety station. I kept the same numbers right now. I still need to, now the board's direction is to work with them on figuring out the new contract, and we'll see if any of their costs went up in terms of labor. That's really the only cost that does go up, and that's the same with the investigator. So we'll negotiate those, but I kept them at the steady number. Next is the general community policing, 30,000. That's an easy one, which we didn't technically use this year because it turned into this budget line item instead into next year's budget. The social media intern, but that would be one of the things that usually come in under community policing. Lastly, no, not lastly, almost lastly is parking. Again, this is hold steady, same thing, parking steady, advertising, parking alternatives. I think the study is going to tie in pretty strongly to something later in the budget, and it's I think finally going to be the year to do it next fiscal year. Next is Program 7000, Public Works. This is the Isla Vista Beautiful program, keeping it the same for now, but one of the direction from the Finance Committee was to talk with United Way on how that program can be, just can do more for the community based on how much it's already been able to do. So this might change a bit, but that's where it is at now. This is, again, maintaining the funding for infrastructure improvements under our power of lighting, sidewalks, street trees, and gutters. And then next is a small fund for public art. And we didn't get to this year, but we definitely had plans to and just weren't able to. And then the last thing is the newest addition to our budget, a new program, which is community planning. And under that is funding for an Isla Vista community plan. Again, these are very rough general numbers, 10,000 for advertising and 90,000 for services of planners and folks like that to help us update and revise the Isla Vista Master Plan into something that can pass and be useful for the community, that's community driven. And that's something that our board leaderships had discussion, Supervisor Hartman, about. And also something where LAFCO has been concerned that we don't budget for all of our powers. And since those two things need to come up at the same time, it transferred pretty nicely into a budget item of funding something like that in the fiscal year. So that is the budget, expenses, and revenue. And then the last quick note, I am required in our policies to do this, so I have to do this last part, which is the reserve balance analysis. So based on the numbers we have of estimated actuals for this fiscal year, we're going to end the year with over $1 million in our fund balance. 56,000 is UCSB funding that we're just stretching between years right now, and then some of it is restricted interest kind of income, and then it ends up us filling all of our funds. So we have our short-term reserve funded, our capital maintenance funded, our self-insurance funded, our capital fund of 300,000 funded, and our long-term strategic is funded for a total of 892,000 in our committed fund balance, which leaves us with 77,000 in our undesignated fund balance. And so that's the preliminary budget.
Thank you for that presentation, Jonathan. Are there any questions from members of the board? I see Jay. I'm going to go over to you.
So, sorry. Oh, yeah. So you've got the $100,000 allocated towards Isla Vista Community Plan. I mean, the county spent just an absolutely incredible amount of money on the master plan, and in the end, it did not finish it. And I just, us beginning to sink money into the master plan. I mean, for what it's worth, when I think about the area planning commission power, I wasn't really thinking myself about the idea of it being part of this kind of like what that master plan was. I mean, I think in the end, actually, in some sense, I think that the premise of the master plans failed, and that was something that having the kind of monolithic, stagnant in some sense community plan was actually part of the problem, and that was what actually led to, I mean, over the course of the whole, like, this became like a giant thing actually when people were running for supervisor over the course of the last 5 years, including myself, about the idea of like trying to figure out a way to have a more lightweight idea. And that was part of having more area planning commissions, was to try to actually have fewer of those master plans, as opposed to having these, again, this like was a very expensive, massive umbrella process that in the end did not obtain enough buy-in over the course of so many years to actually succeed in providing the value, because everyone has got their thing that they end up hating about it, and it ends up getting appealed to everybody you can possibly appeal that plan to. So I'm not certain if it myself, if it makes sense to be allocating us that much money towards that. I mean, if we want to try to figure out how to allocate something because we want to allocate it towards area planning commission, I feel like there might be something better than towards a community plan. But yeah, because yeah. And then the second thing I wanted to bring up is that I continue to believe that we should figure out somewhere in our budget to add for what is known and again, I think there's a terminology overlap here that causes confusion in various ways, but what is essentially known in like software development, you might say, or like technology as a community manager. Somebody who actually, the definition here is sometimes also like acts as a liaison between the organization and its audience, acts as voice, tone, and particularly moderator of a brand. But somebody who essentially is I think the social media intern premise is kind of like overlapping in some sense, but I kind of want to like push on it, expand that to look into somebody who really is kind of like constantly figuring out how to continue to keep our people engaged, right? I mean, the whole thing about like optimizing for engagement and various things, you know, there are ways in which that's evil and there are ways in which that's actually really great. And that's, I think that the way that a lot of people in particularly our younger audience are kind of used to being engaged with. And I think to the extent to which I've seen experiments and been personally involved in experiments to do that here in Isla Vista, I think they've worked really well. And again, something I feel like could be added somewhere in our budget at some point. I don't know what that means. Have to be try to do less of if we're actually, you know, using our budget. But I will continue to push for that whenever I have chances to. So
I actually did have a plan for that, and I did discuss it a little bit with our finance committee. And I mean to, you know, at the next board meeting have like a specific agenda item where I can talk more on this, because it is a point well taken, and it is, you know, I think the board has mentioned it many times that, you know, we're not as there's not as much awareness as there could be about the community services district. So it is something we do need to solve. We've tried things this year, again, at the intern level, where it does work in some ways, but it's inconsistent because of just the nature of that kind of work. And so what my idea here, and again, I want to flesh this out a little more, and I'll come back with the board at the next meeting now that we've got the budget out of the way and the community center grant set up out of the way. Like we've got decisions kind of on that point. And the basic idea though is that the community center director position would become something like an assistant general manager for community programs. And so they oversee that area of our operation. And then when we talk about like Paulina's position, which was like the assistant director back at IV Youth Projects, my idea is to kind of pivot that position into, okay, they still take in the scheduling requests for the buildings, but because of that is such a public facing role and position already, and it is just scheduling, it could be kind of, you know, you can expand that into also being the voice and, you know, the community manager and the person, you know, sending out the emails and making sure that people are engaged with us, because they already need to do that for the community center and the community room. And so I'm developing it more, but that's kind of where the idea is at right now, is that our community center assistant role would also take on this role that, you know, having the community center kind of be the a version of our voice, if that makes sense. I'm still workshopping how it exactly sounds.
Thanks, Jonathan. Looking forward to seeing that proposal fully fleshed out, and appreciate Director Freeman, you for always bringing that issue up. And I'm glad that we're going to be able to consider it a little bit more seriously now. I just want to say for community planning, to give a little bit of rationale for what we've discussed. The first thing is that we believe that in conjunction with Supervisor Hartman and her knowledge of the county, that we have an opening right now to be able to get some accomplishments under our belt in that regard. And we also think that one of the things that we'll be able to provide that wasn't there in the past was sort of both staff on the inside that can help advocate for our organization's viewpoint. And whereas I think that what history shows is that when a big outside organization comes in to a small community and says, what is it that you people want? They're not really able to effectively get one answer, because all of the different discussions just sound like a big quarrel to them. whereas we have hands in the community, and that's what's different this time when it comes to planning. We also really, I just think, can't afford to neglect it. I mean, we even heard today when we were getting the building report, it really punctuates the fact that our zoning is old. We have our community center and our community resource building zoned commercial still. We've got to be able to make a little bit of progress on this issue, and I think that this is a step towards doing that. Now, I will give the one caveat that I know that the county is facing potential budget difficulties, as many government organizations are. And so we're going to continue to monitor that situation with Supervisor Hartman and her staff to be able to see whether the timing is still right on this. But I definitely think it's something our board should continue. And it strikes me as more meaningful than just an administrative body, which is what the APC would end up being, and would allow us to actually spend our dollars on getting an outcome sooner rather than with the APC, which would be tons of our staff time trying to get the county to agree to it, possibly to no avail. I believe at this point in time that it would be to no avail. But with this, we'll be able to still have a voice in the planning process. So that's my thoughts on that. I appreciate everyone's input. Are there other board comments on the budget? Okay, then with that, I think we will receive and file this report. Well, actually, before I do that, I'm going to give one ask. Are there any members of the public who have requests to speak on the preliminary budget? Okay, then with that, we'll receive and file this. Jonathan, I don't think we need any action on the preliminary budget, but we will be taking it up continually and soliciting more community feedback as we continue the process. Thanks to the committee and to staff for your hard work put into this.
Thank you. One last point. On our committee did decide to extend the survey to the end of the month, and the survey links on our website under what are we up to, resources for you. It's under both of them. So if you do know people who'd be interested in sending us feedback, I even got an email today asking me how someone can do that. Please send them to the survey. We're going to read all the responses, and they're really good responses. I think everyone will enjoy going through them.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us down to reports first, because I know in closed session going to have to recuse themselves. So let's just go right into reports. First, from members of the board. Any members of the board have a report?
Yes, Ethan here. If possible, can we have our reports just done in writing, since it is getting late? Any of us who have something to share can share in writing.
Sure, I'm okay with that, if that's amenable with the rest of the board.
I didn't have a report today.
Particularly from staff, not saying that us board members will send things to each other.
Yeah, I can send you my report in writing.
Do any board members have concern with that approach?
I guess I do consider Jonathan's report to actually be something critical to have in the normal flow of pathway with the public. And so unless it were to be, like, for example, sent as part of the board packet to the next meeting, I mean, maybe we could just spend a few minutes and have Jonathan do his report. Like, I would rather.
Jonathan, do you think you could attach your written report or post it on the website?
My report is some bullet notes right now, but I can write it out more and get it attached.
Sure.
It's only understandable to me right now.
Sure. I understand that. I know it's a different format. I'm trying to just be flexible.
Are you really expecting specifically Jonathan's report to take that long? Like,
it's quick, but it's up to you.
Let's go ahead and suspend all the reports except for Jonathan, and we'll have Jonathan give his. Jonathan, you can go ahead now.
Yeah, it's going to be really quick. The census outreach is now in full swing, and we're only still at 41% reporting in Isla Vista. That's really bad. But we have our phone banking system set up, and we have a system for board members to record a video to the community. And so if you're interested in either one, and I hope everyone at least does one or the other, either call residents or record a video on your phone speaking on why the census is important. I'll send you something on how you can get involved in that, but I really would love for all of you to be, I think it helps just a little extra to a resident to get a phone call from one of their local elected officials asking them to do something like this. Another thing is Spencer and I were on a call this morning with the county of Santa Barbara on the reopening of the county. And so Spencer is the team chair for Isla Vista, and I'm the team lead. Pretty much Spencer's going to run the meetings. I'm going to help, facilitate them, exactly what we do here. But we need to come up with a list of 8 people to be our direct, stakeholders who give us input. And it's going to be in a very fast timeline. We're going to get the plan for reopening on Friday, and then or Monday, and then we're going to need to submit our comment by Friday, the 8th. And have this kind of input process within the next 10 days at this point. So look out for that, but that's coming. And then the board direction last meeting to do the mediation expansion is going really well. Our direct mail piece is going to be in people's mailboxes at the beginning of next week, hopefully. And we've already gotten a couple mediation requests under this new marketing tactic. We have 2 people who've sent in COVID related mediations, and besides that, the bulk of my time has been going towards the community center, the budget, and starting up the compost program as well, on top of just COVID-19 response. So
thank you, Jonathan. We really appreciate your hard work during this time, and looking forward to serving with you on that committee. I think that's going to be important right now. Okay, with that, we are going to, if board members have reports, email them out to the rest of the board, and we're gonna move into closed session. So Jonathan, I think you've got some procedures for how to get everyone off the call.
I can actually do everyone into the waiting room now. People don't have to leave the call like last time. Move you into the waiting.
That's great. Do we need to read off into the record, closed session? This is conference with real property negotiators, government code 54956.8. This is for 970 and 976 Embarcadero Del Mar. Negotiators are myself, Spencer Brandt, Bob Geis, Jonathan Aboud, Ross Trindle, District Council. We're negotiating with the County of Santa Barbara, and we're the Community Services District. Under negotiation is price and terms of payment. All right, we will now.
This is George. I'd move that we table this item until we receive the full report of the condition of both buildings.
So I'm going to take us into closed session because I think we've still got some things to discuss. I appreciate your concern. We're going to be as brief as we possibly can. So
no, Spencer, I just made a motion. Okay, is there a second? You asked for a second.
All right, is there a second? Okay, motion dies. All right, let's move into closed session. Thanks, everyone. We're going to make it brief.
I think the Nexus person. So
thanks.
Yeah. Okay, she's back. You can say it again.
Okay, go ahead, Ross.
Yeah, the board is left closed session. There was no reportable action for anything discussed or any actions taken in closed session.
Okay, thank you, Ross. On to item 7, future meeting dates. Our next regular meeting will be May 12th, 2020 at 6 p.m. It will be virtually here over Zoom, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Made by Freeman, seconded by Geis. Any public comment? Further discussion? All right, Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Thurlow, Director
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. We will see you soon. Take care. Stay
Bye.
safe and healthy.
Good night.
Bye, everybody. Good night.
Good night. Thank